Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the thin, crisp morning air of the Andes, right at the moment when the sky is still deciding whether it wants to be blue or gold. You stand on a high stone terrace, wrapped in that early morning hush that feels half like a dream and half like a dare. The wind brushes past your shoulders as if checking whether you're awake yet, and below you, endless terraced fields step down the mountainside like they're preparing for a parade that only the sun gets to watch. You can smell cold stone, earth, and a little bit of wood smoke from a cooking fire somewhere behind you. And in front, stretching far beyond what your sleepy eyes think is reasonable, lies the world you're about to run across. You probably won't survive this. Let's be honest, you get winded climbing a flight of stairs, but for now you pretend you're built for this altitude. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I love seeing our little nighttime caravan gather from all over the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're jolted fully awake by a sound you don't quite recognize at first. A sharp inhale, the rustle of woven cloth, and the unmistakable rhythm of footsteps kicking into life. You turn and see one of the Chaskis, an Incan messenger runner, already bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. His breathing is smooth and deep, and he's somehow both alert and completely calm. It's barely dawn, and he looks like he's been waiting hours for the sun to catch up. You, meanwhile, are still arguing with your own legs about basic participation. The Chaska pulls on a woven sling bag dyed in indigo and russet, colors that glow warmly in the first light. His sandals are simple but sturdy, the kind of footwear that laughs silently at modern running shoes, which, ironically, you still have tied to your pack because you don't quite trust yourself barefoot on ancient mountain rock. As you step toward the edge of the terrace, the valley below reveals itself all at once. The Andes wrap around the world like some ancient giant curled up for a nap, their ridges dusted with snow that sparkles with tiny shards of gold from the rising sun. The air is thin, and each breath feels like sipping from the sky through a narrow straw. Yet there's something strangely energizing about it, too. Your lungs stretch, your heartbeat steadies, and you can almost imagine yourself becoming one with the altitude, like the locals who've done this their whole lives. Somewhere to your left, a few more runners are preparing for the day. One adjusts the strap on his chew spa, the small pouch that carries coca leaves. Another checks the knots on a quipu, making sure none loosen during the night. Historians still argue whether each color pattern represented numbers, names, or entire stories, but right now all you know is that you're terrified of dropping one and accidentally inventing a whole new meaning. A woman in a saffron shawl approaches and hands you a warm drink made from maize. It smells faintly sweet and earthy, and when you sip it, heat spreads through your chest like a slow sunrise. For a moment you think, okay, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can run across an empire today. But then you glance at the distance the others are about to cover, mountains stacked behind mountains, and your confidence takes a polite step back. Still, you feel the pull of the world waking up. Morning birds chirp from the terraces below. A llama snorts at you from the walkway, as if judging your posture. The stone beneath your feet radiates leftover warmth from yesterday's sun, even though the air around your face is cold enough to pinch your cheeks. The Chaska beside you gestures to the road ahead, a narrow ribbon of stone that disappears into the horizon like a trail of quiet promise. This is the Capac Nan, the great Incan road, an engineering masterpiece stretching thousands of kilometers through mountains, deserts, and jungles. It's older than most countries and sturdier than your willpower before coffee. And now, apparently, you're going to walk it, or at least shuffle enthusiastically. You take a few steps forward, feeling the ground's solidity beneath you. The rocks are fitted so tightly together, you can barely slip a blade of grass between them. This road has carried emperors, couriers, armies, and traders. Today, it carries you, someone who still needs to stretch before getting out of a car. As you start moving, the sun climbs higher, painting the mountainsides in gold, bronze, and soft rose. Shadows shrink and drip away from the terraces. Everything smells cleaner, brighter, awake. The Chaska runs ahead to scout the path, his pace steady, effortless, almost floating. You follow at a gentler rhythm, your footsteps tapping softly against the stone in a cadence that feels ancient and brand new at the same time. Alongside the road, small stone shelters nestle into the mountainside. Some hold clay pots of water, others store dried foods, and a few, you're told, house offerings left for travelers. Tiny figurines, woven dolls, or smooth stones arranged in patterns whose meanings are lost to time. You pause at one of these, fingers brushing along a carved disc decorated with spirals. You have no idea what it signifies, and historians still argue whether these symbols mark sacred sites or strategic points. But holding it connects you to every traveler who stopped here before. As you stand, wind sweeping up from the valley, you feel something unexpected. You're not just watching history, you're walking straight into it. And the Andes welcome you with the soft, steady heartbeat of a world that never really sleeps. You ease further along the stone terrace as the morning light strengthens, and that first Chaska, the one who looked like he woke up sprinting, motions for you to follow him down a narrow path. His stride is quick but relaxed, every movement smooth, efficient, practice from a lifetime lived at altitude. You try to imitate his pace, but your legs respond with the enthusiasm of two sleepy llamas refusing to cooperate. Still, you press on, because apparently you now travel with professionals. The Chaska introduces himself with a name you can't quite pronounce, so you mentally nickname him Lightning Feet. He laughs when he notices you doing the subtle little, "I'm fine, this is fine," struggle breath. You can tell he's seen this before. Foreigners meeting Andean elevation and losing the first round instantly. He slows just enough for you to pretend you're keeping up, which is generous in a slightly humiliating way. As you descend to the runner's training area, the sun lands fully on the field, revealing a flat stretch of earth bordered by tall, itchy grass. Several Chaskies are already there warming up, some run drills in long weaving patterns. Others stretch their calves while balancing on uneven stones. One young runner does a series of short bursts, so fast you swear he flickers between positions like a glitching video game character. And meanwhile, you take a moment to stretch your hamstrings and pretend you don't hear something pop. Training with the Chaskies is a privilege reserved mostly for those who carry messages or supplies. And you, apparently, because some cosmic scheduling mistake has put you here. The Inca Empire depended entirely on these runners, who relayed information across thousands of kilometers faster than most medieval kingdoms could dream of. There were no horses in the empire. Human legs were the engines of communication. Historians still argue whether the fastest Chaskies could complete coastal to highland relays in under a day, but the legends suggest feats that border on supernatural. Lightning Feet hands you a practice sling bag, woven from llama, wool dyed in teal and saffron. It's light now, just a few small stones inside to mimic weight. When he swings his own bag over his shoulder, it settles perfectly across his chest. When you do the same, it immediately thumps your ribcage in a way that announces, "You're not built for this, my friend." Still, you tighten the cord and pretend it feels natural. Another runner steps forward carrying a quipu, the knotted cord system used for record keeping. He places it in your hands with ceremonious precision. This one has multiple strands, some thick, some thin, some dyed earthy reds and deep blues. You turn it over, admiring the knots that look deceptively simple. The Chaska tells you these patterns might represent quantities of goods, locations, or even entire narratives. Historians still argue about the extent of the quipu's language function. To this day, they're decoding its secrets like an ancient puzzle. You nod along, trying to look scholarly, while secretly panicking that you might drop it and undo the taxation record of some 500-year-old village. Lightning Feet demonstrates how Chaskies often carried messages, not just quipus, but verbal instructions memorized word for word. You watch as two runners rehearse a message exchange, one reciting political updates with quiet intensity, the other repeating every syllable back perfectly. You can't help imagining yourself in the same role, but your modern brain knows it would turn urgent royal decree into something about corn and a guy named us something. The Chaska notices your spiraling thoughts and offers a reassuring tap on your arm. He gestures toward the road beyond the training area, where other runners are exchanging messages at a small checkpoint. They treat the process with the same seriousness you give to checking your phone notifications. but with less doom scrolling and more barefoot agility. As the group begins their warm-up lap, you join them, your steps crunching softly on the firm dirt. A few runners glance back at you with amused smirks, but also with encouragement. Like you're the new apprentice nobody thinks will last, but everyone secretly hopes will surprise them. One of them even gives you a playful shoulder nudge as he passes, nearly knocking you into a bush. You decide to interpret that as camaraderie. The training exercises get progressively more challenging. There's a drill where you sprint between two markers placed 50 meters apart. The Chaskies complete it with steady, rhythmic breathing. When your turn comes, you sprint the first half convincingly, then slow dramatically as your lungs remind you that oxygen is a myth. You finish with a triumphant gasp that sounds like a deflating bellows. Lightning Feet gives you a polite clap, just enough to acknowledge effort without suggesting success. Then there's the balance drill. A row of uneven stones forms a narrow path where runners practice moving quickly without slipping. The Chaskies dance across them like mountain goats auditioning for a ballet. You take one step, wobble, take another, wobble harder, and eventually cross with the grace of a shopping cart navigating gravel. The runners cheer anyway, and you laugh with them. Even here, competition is gentle, good-natured, almost playful. You appreciate that. Sleepy stories don't need harsh judgments. After drills, the runners gather in a circle to stretch and share coca leaves. They chew them casually, letting the mild stimulant ease breathing and reduce fatigue. You're offered a few leaves as well, green, glossy, with a faint earthy scent. You accept, tucking them into your cheek the way they show you. The bitterness hits quickly, but so does the strange, warm clarity that opens your lungs just a little wider. It's subtle, steady, nothing like an energy drink, more like the mountain itself quietly deciding you may stay. As you sit in the circle, the Chaskies trade stories. One mentions a time he crossed a section of the road during a hailstorm, so sudden it felt like the sky threw marbles at him. Another talks about outrunning a territorial llama, which, based on your morning encounter, feels extremely plausible. Lightning Feet recounts a story about training with his father, who made him run uphill while carrying a basket of potatoes, so he would never forget the weight of responsibility. You wonder briefly if this is a universal parenting technique in the Andes. Someone points toward the mountains and mentions that the Sapa Inca himself expects a message delivered later today. The tone shifts slightly, still calm, but with a thread of purpose weaving through the air. You feel it too. Even though you're a visitor, the energy of the relay system pulls you in. These runners aren't just athletes, they're lifelines. They carry diplomacy, trade orders, warnings, celebrations. Every footstep they take shapes the pulse of the empire. And then, as the morning sun climbs higher, Lightning Feet rises and offers his hand to help you up. He motions toward the trail with a friendly half-smile, the universal runner's expression for, let's see what you've got. You dust off your tunic, breathe the thin air deeply, and step forward with the rest of the team, just another traveler in a line that stretches back centuries. The Chaska runners did not live in the same world of minutes and hours that we do today. To them, time stretched and folded in strange ways along the mountain roads, as if the paths themselves were bending reality while they ran. Every journey began in the dim light of early morning, when the sun had not yet risen above the sharp Andean ridges. The world felt muted then, wrapped in a soft blue haze, and the runners would step onto the trail with the sense that they were slipping into a place where ordinary rules no longer applied. The moment their feet touched the narrow stone road, they became part of something older and larger than themselves. These roads, carved into cliffs and woven across impossible landscapes, had carried messages long before they were born, and they would continue to carry them long after they were gone. As the runner settled into his pace, the mountains around him began to shift in scale. Peaks that looked distant would suddenly loom close, while hills that seemed near appeared to drift away. The thin air made each breath deliberate, each inhalation a slow act of gathering strength. He learned to move in harmony with it, not fighting the altitude, but allowing his lungs to find their own rhythm, one that matched the pulse of the land beneath his feet. Over time, the miles stopped feeling like miles. The pathway turned into a long ribbon of silence, stretching across valleys, skirting deep ravines, and wrapping around slopes where the sky felt close enough to touch. The runner's body would grow warm, then light, and eventually almost translucent, as if the boundary between him and the world had softened. He could hear distant waterfalls before he saw them, and sometimes he sensed the presence of wildlife watching him from the trees long before they revealed themselves. What made the experience so unusual was not just the distance, but the stillness within that distance. The runner was constantly moving, yet inside, a quiet expanded, an inner space where thoughts drifted in and out like slow-moving clouds. Some days he would remember the stories his elders told him about the sacred Apis, the mountain spirits who guarded the Andes. Other days he barely thought at all, letting the path guide him forward, trusting that the rhythm of his steps knew something his mind did not. But perhaps the most extraordinary part of these journeys was what happened when he approached the Chaska stations. Small lookout huts, perched high on cliffs, or tucked along narrow bends in the trail. From a distance, he could just make out another runner, standing perfectly still, watching the horizon. They rarely spoke. Their exchange was not verbal, but almost ceremonial, as though they were participating in an ancient dance of movement and stillness. The moment the message changed hands, one runner would launch forward while the other sank into the calm of rest, and time seemed to shift again, collapsing one chapter of the relay and unfolding the next. To the Chaskies, the road was not a challenge to conquer. It was a companion, an ancient presence that walked with them, tested them, sheltered them, and sometimes revealed quiet truths that could only be heard in the steady sound of their footsteps. And as the runner pressed onward, he carried not only the Empire's message, but also the strange feeling that he was traveling through a world where time was not strict or linear, but fluid, elastic, responsive to breath and intention. Hours often felt like moments. Moments sometimes felt like entire lifetimes. And by the time the runner glimpsed the next station in the distance, he sensed, deep in his bones, that the Andes had shaped him a little more than they had the day before. You keep moving along the mountain path, and the world around you begins to shift in a way that feels almost cinematic, as if the Andes are trying to show you their favorite angles. The ridge you're following bends slowly to the right, opening into a wide valley dotted with small terrace farms, each one carved into the slope with precise, geometric confidence. You can practically feel the pride of the engineers who shaped them centuries ago, stacking stones into walls so finely balanced that they've survived earthquakes that would have toppled entire cities. The Incas always built like they expected the mountains to test them, and the mountains always did. Here, the air is warmer, wrapped in the faint scent of sun-warmed Ichu grass and distant wood smoke from settlements hidden behind bends in the path. Your feet strike the ground in a steady rhythm as you settle into a long, rolling section of road. This is where the Chaska runners truly come alive, on stretches that feel like invitations rather than challenges, where the world seems to hold its breath and let them pass. As you run, you spot a herd of Andean camelids grazing lazily along the slope. A mix of llamas and alpacas, fluffy, dignified, and quietly judgmental. They pause their chewing to stare at you with expressions that suggest they are evaluating your form. Llamas have always been the unofficial critics of the Andes. One of them gives you a look that says, "Your foot placement could be better." It's good-natured feedback, of course, but you still straighten your back a little, purely out of pride. Then, without warning, the path narrows. It cuts along the side of a cliff so steep that looking left gives you a direct view into the airy nothingness below. The stonework under your feet becomes tighter, cleaner, unmistakably Inca. This part of the trail was deliberately fortified. Historians still argue whether these reinforced cliff paths were meant to impress, to intimidate, or simply to keep messengers like you alive, but whatever the reason, you're grateful for the perfectly angled stones. The road feels solid, balanced, almost comforting, like a hand placed gently against your back to guide you forward. The wind picks up here. It slides past your ears with a soft whistle, carrying the faint echo of a bird's cry. You listen for a moment, trying to place it. Could be a condor, if you're lucky. These massive birds glide on thermal currents like they've made some secret pact with gravity, and sometimes you catch a glimpse of one sweeping across the valley, its wings casting shadows that stretch for yards. The Incas believed condors could move between the earthly world and the heavens, acting as messengers of their own. You can't help but wonder, if a condor carried your message instead, would it get there faster? Probably. Would it judge your running form like the llamas do? Almost definitely. You continue forward, gaining altitude. The air becomes thinner, and your breathing grows deeper and more deliberate. But something strange happens. You feel lighter. Runners often say that altitude makes the world sharper, more focused, as if every rock, every gust of wind, every shifting patch of light contains a tiny secret waiting to be noticed. And you do notice things, like the way the mountains in the distance shimmer slightly under the sun, or how the tiny wildflowers along the trail lean, almost imperceptibly, in the same direction, as if following some ancient rhythm of the wind. At one point, you pass a tiny stone shelter built into the wall of the mountain. It's so small you almost miss it, but you pause just long enough to peek inside. The interior holds nothing but a single woven basket tucked in a corner. Maybe it once carried coca leaves, maybe spare sandals, maybe some forgotten snack left by a Chaska centuries ago. There's a small, almost playful possibility that the basket held kiwichi, a quirky Andean treat made of toasted corn mixed with herbs. Basically the spiritual cousin of modern trail mix. The Incas really understood on-the-go snacking long before convenience stores existed. You return to the trail with a renewed stride. The path begins to descend in a gentle curve, revealing a long wooden bridge stretched across a deep gorge. These Huachuca bridges were woven entirely from grass, replaced every year in a ceremony that still survives today. The engineering alone is astonishing, but the ceremony is even better. A multi-day festival of weaving, feasting, singing, repairing, and laughing. Imagine if modern road maintenance worked like that. Instead of closed highways and warning signs, you'd get a party. Approaching the bridge, you slow, not out of fear, but respect. The grass ropes sway softly in the breeze, and the entire structure gives a steady, organic creak beneath your feet. Crossing it feels like walking on something alive, something that knows your steps and adjusts for them. Your hands brush the side ropes, rough and warm from the sun, and for a moment you become acutely aware that this bridge has carried the weight of countless runners before you. People with messages, people with hopes, people delivering small slices of the Empire's lifeblood. On the other side, the road widens again, leading you to a plateau bathed in gold. The sunlight here is different, softer, almost buttery, melting over the landscape in warm layers. You pause just long enough to take it in, letting the warmth seep into your muscles. Then you hear a faint whistle, high and sharp, echoing from somewhere ahead. A Chaska lookout call. You're getting close. The presence of another runner always adds a subtle charge to the air, like you're nearing a finish line that instantly becomes a starting line for someone else. You spot him standing near a stone hut, alert but relaxed, scanning the horizon with practiced focus. His posture is calm, almost serene, as if he's been waiting for you not for minutes, but for exactly the right moment in the rhythm of the day. As you approach, he steps forward. No words exchange. They don't need to. You simply pass him the message bundle. Nothing more than a tightly wrapped knot of woven fibers, but it carries the voice of the Empire. He grips it with a quiet nod, turns, and explodes in emotion, his sandals kicking up tiny clouds of dust as he disappears down the next road. You remain there for a moment, breathing deeply. The Andes are completely still around you, as if acknowledging your part in the great relay. Sometimes the silence feels like applause. Other times it feels like the mountains clearing their throats before offering some timeless piece of advice. Right now it feels like encouragement, gentle, steady, reassuring. And with that, you step into the shade of the stone hut, letting your muscles release. The road will call you again soon, but for now you rest. You don't rest for long. The moment your breathing evens out and your legs stop buzzing, that familiar shift in the atmosphere returns. The sense that the road is already stirring again, nudging you with a quiet tap on the shoulder. You rise, stretch your arms toward the carved stone ceiling of the hut, and step back into the sunlight, letting its warmth coat your skin like a thin, golden blanket. The next leg of the journey always begins this way, not with a command, but with an invitation. You move downhill at first, easing your muscles back into motion, feeling the subtle tug of gravity guiding each step. The path curves through a cluster of ancient quinoa trees, their pale trunks twisting skyward like slow-growing flames. Their leaves shimmer with a soft silver sheen in the breeze, making the entire grove look as if it has been dusted with moonlight, even in the middle of the day. The trees have survived conditions that would wither most plants: dry air, thin soil, bitter temperatures, and you get the sense they're giving you a nod of solidarity. Endurance knows endurance. As the trail widens, you begin to hear the distant rush of water. Eventually, it reveals itself, a long, stepped waterfall tumbling down a cliffside in rhythmic sheets, its spray turning into tiny rainbows when the sun strikes at the right angle. It feels almost unreal, like you've stumbled into a painting that's been waiting centuries for someone to notice it again. The Incas often built their roads near water sources, both for practical reasons and spiritual ones. Water meant life. Water meant connection. And, occasionally, water meant a place to splash your face dramatically while pretending you aren't sweating quite as much as you actually are. The sound of the waterfall becomes your temporary soundtrack, grounding your steps. Every time your foot touches the path, the vibrations blend with the steady crash of the water until the entire valley seems to be breathing alongside you. Somewhere near the top of the falls, you notice an Inca stone channel, one of those ingenious waterworks carved so precisely that it still funnels water long after its builders return to the earth. Historians still argue whether the channels were purely utilitarian or subtly ceremonial. But standing here, listening to the music of the falls, you can't help feeling the spiritual weight of the design. The Incas didn't just move water, they choreographed it. The road begins to climb again, and you follow it as it snakes upward through a series of switchbacks. Each turn reveals a slightly different angle on the world around you. Sometimes a sheer wall of granite, sometimes a panoramic spill of terraced farmland, sometimes a single distant hut clinging to the mountainside, as if refusing to let go. With every switchback, the air sharpens, growing cooler and thinner, until each breath feels like carefully sipping from a shared cup of oxygen. You slow your pace, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. Even the most trained Chascan knew when to listen to the altitude. Along one of these bends, you spot a tiny cluster of structures built from smooth, precisely placed stones. This is a tambos, a rest station. Not a large one, just a modest pair of huts with a small courtyard that opens toward the valley. The Empire dotted these across the Andes like check-in points on a celestial map, ensuring messengers and travelers never went too long without shelter. You consider stopping, but something about the energy of the road pulls you onward, so you simply offer the huts a respectful glance and keep moving. Not far past the tambos, you encounter a young boy herding a pair of alpacas along the trail. He pauses, watching you with wide, curious eyes, and you offer him a small wave as you pass. He waves back, then grins, a bright, sincere grin that instantly lightens the density of the mountain air. He digs into a small woven pouch at his hip and pulls out something round and pale. Maku, a dried Andean tuber that looks suspiciously like a pebble, but softens into something surprisingly sweet once chewed. You accept it with a nod. It's chewy. It's earthy. It's a little strange. But it keeps your energy steady, and you suspect it's the kind of snack Chaskies used long before fancy gel packets existed. You continue onward, feeling the maca dissolving slowly on your tongue as the path rises into one of the most dramatic stretches yet. To your right, the mountain slopes upward in jagged layers of rock and moss. To your left, the land drops away into a vast, cloud-filled canyon that seems bottomless. The trail becomes narrow again, just wide enough for 2 feet, if those 2 feet agree to behave themselves. You walk lightly, carefully, listening to the subtle crunch of gravel beneath your sandals and the gentle hum of the wind weaving through the canyon. The world feels big here, bigger than thought, bigger than fear, bigger than the small message bundles that keep the Empire running. About halfway along this cliffside path, you notice a bizarre little stone carving set into the wall. It's a face, wide-eyed, tongue sticking out, unmistakably mischievous. No one knows exactly why these odd carvings appear in random parts of the Inca road system. Scholars still debate whether they were spiritual guardians, trail markers, jokes left by overworked stonemasons, or some combination of all three. Whatever the reason, this one seems to be silently cheering you on, or teasing you. Hard to tell with the tongue. Eventually, the path widens again, leading you to a sunny plateau with a view that steals your breath even more than the altitude does. Mountains stack into the horizon like waves frozen mid-crest. Clouds drift around their peaks, catching the light and glowing like giant lanterns suspended in the sky. You stop, not to rest, but to absorb, to witness, to remember. Because here, in this place, it becomes clear why the Chaskies ran. It wasn't just duty or training or even the rhythm of the Empire. It was this, the land itself. The chance to glide through a world that feels ancient, alive, and somehow deeply aware of your presence. The Andes don't just watch you run. They honor it. You let that truth settle into you with the warmth of the sun. Then you take a long, slow breath. Then another. And when your lungs are ready, you press onward once more. You follow the curve of the plateau until the trail begins sloping downward again, narrowing into a clean, deliberate line of stones that seems almost too precise to be natural. It's the kind of engineering you've come to recognize immediately. True Inca craftsmanship, where every rock is shaped and laid with mathematical confidence. Builders of the Empire didn't use mortar. They shaped stones so perfectly that they clicked together like puzzle pieces, resisting earthquakes with a flexibility modern architects still admire. The Empire didn't just conquer terrain. They cooperated with it, persuaded it, built in harmony with it. You feel that every time your feet hit these stones, they don't resist you. They guide you. The descent becomes steeper, but the road remains reassuringly even underfoot. You lean forward slightly, letting gravity take on some of the work. The air thickens with the scent of earth and wild herbs, and a soft rustling from the brush to your left catches your attention. A small creature darts across the trail, a viscacha with its oversized ears and fluffy tail bouncing behind it like it's late for a meeting. These little animals always look mildly offended to see you, as if you're interrupting their private commute. You smile, appreciating the charm of a creature that seems to embody both ancient wisdom and cartoonish confusion. As you continue downward, you begin to notice carved stones along the path. Markers, each one etched with geometric patterns. They resemble stylized suns, stepped diamonds, and spirals, symbols that appear repeatedly in Inca art and architecture. Their exact meanings are still debated by scholars. Some believe the symbols mark distances, others think they denote sacred boundaries, and some insist they're sophisticated astronomical signatures, little stone reminders of the cosmos woven into everyday life. You pause at one of them, tracing the pattern with your fingertips. It's warm from the sun. The grooves are deep, precise, intentional. Someone carved this centuries ago, and now here you are, letting the stone imprint its memory onto your skin. Farther down the path, the terrain changes again. The trail spills into a lush highland valley where a stream winds through fields of tall ichu grass, shimmering gold under the afternoon sunlight. You slow your pace, not out of fatigue, but out of instinct. This valley feels like a pause in the story, a gentle exhale from the landscape itself. The distant sound of the stream is soothing, and your steps naturally fall into rhythm with its flow. You breathe deeper here, feeling the warm air expand in your lungs like a soft, healing balm. You spot a small structure near the water, an ancient granary called a kolka, built partly into the hillside. The Incas used these as storage houses for food, tools, and emergency supplies. Their design was brilliant. Stone walls, narrow ventilation slots, and elevated floors kept grain dry and cool even in shifting mountain climates. Many still stand today, outlasting modern structures made with far more resources. You approach the kolka, peering inside. The interior is dim but surprisingly cool, and there's an old, woven basket still sitting in the corner. It's empty, of course, but a faint smell of dried maize lingers in the air, as if the ghosts of ancient harvests still live in the stones. Beside the granary, perched on a flat rock, sits something unexpected, a tiny bundle of woven fibers knotted in the style of a quipu. A quipu was the Empire's version of a data recording device, color-coded cords, each with distinct knots that communicated numbers, categories, or even narrative sequences. Quipus could record census info, livestock counts, labor quotas, astronomy, you name it. There's still debate among historians about whether quipus also contained more nuanced storytelling. Some argue they encoded full historical narratives. Others insist they were purely numerical. Holding this small bundle, you feel the mystery of it. You imagine the hands that tied these knots, the quiet discipline it required, the seriousness of preserving information in thread. After leaving the valley, the trail rises again. You press forward, letting your legs settle into that steady, mind-melting rhythm runners sometimes call the floating phase. You don't feel like you're pushing anymore. You feel like you're simply continuing, carried forward by momentum and breath, and a kind of deep, contented focus. The landscape stretches wide on both sides, a mosaic of earth tones. Ochre cliffs, emerald terraces, soft teal shadows. That shifts in subtle gradients as the sun arcs lower in the sky. Eventually, the terrain begins to close in around you again, funneled between two massive rock walls. A narrow gorge forms ahead, and the trail threads directly through it. The air cools instantly, touched by shadows that linger here long after leaving the rest of the world. You can hear your footsteps echoing faintly, mingling with a distant dripping sound. The walls rise high on both sides, streaked with vertical lines of mineral deposits that glitter faintly when small shafts of light slip through gaps in the rock. As you pass deeper into the gorge, you notice faint carvings etched into the stone. Simple figures, spirals, animals with exaggerated proportions. They don't look like official Inca work. These are older, rougher, perhaps carved by pre-Inca cultures or traveling groups who moved through these mountains long before the empire unified the region. The Andean world was layered long before the Incas shaped it, and you can feel those layers here. Centuries of footsteps, millennia of stories, all flowing through the same passage. For a moment, you imagine them walking right beside you, a silent procession of travelers sharing the same road across time. Then, without warning, the gorge opens into a breathtaking panorama. The valley spreads out beneath you like a woven tapestry. Fields terraced in great steps, stone houses nestled together like clustered beads, and smoke swirling in gentle ribbons from distant cooking fires. The sun sits low now, casting long shadows that stretch across the land like dark, soft fingers. You can hear faint sounds drifting upward, children laughing, wooden flutes being played, the steady pounding of someone grinding maize on a stone slab. You take one long breath, then another. This is the world the Chasca runners carried messages across. Not just mountains, not just roads, but people, entire communities connected through those narrow stone paths, relying on runners like you to stitch their world together one step at a time. Near the top of the ridge, you find a small lookout platform made from perfectly fitted blocks of granite, likely used by Chasquis to spot the next runner. You stand there for a moment, letting the wind tug at your clothing, as if adjusting you for the next part of the journey. Below, the road dips toward a settlement where you know another runner is waiting, poised like a coiled spring. You press onward. The road welcomes you back without hesitation. And so the runner pressed on, feeling the landscape change beneath his feet. The flat, sandy coast gave way to rolling highland paths carved in the mountainsides, where the air grew thinner with every mile. Clouds drifted low across the peaks, brushing against his face like cold fingers. But instead of slowing him, the elevation sharpened his senses. Every sound, wind clashing against stone, llamas bleating in distant valleys, the rhythmic slap of his sandals, felt amplified, almost musical. He reached a narrow ridge where the world seemed split in two. On one side, the plunging shadow of a canyon. On the other, a stretch of green terraces layered like giant steps built into the earth. Here, an ancient rest post, another tambo, stood waiting, its stone walls warmed by the afternoon sun. Inside, a second runner prepared for the relay. This man was younger, wiry, with braids that swung past his shoulders. He didn't speak as the first runner arrived. He simply held out his hands. The exchange had to be perfect. No wasted movement, no delay. The first runner handed him a pouch of messages wrapped in knotted quipus, and, more importantly, the small leather packet containing what kept them moving, the sacred food. A few quick bites were all the new runner needed. Again, the transformation was immediate. Fatigue slipped away, replaced with a sense of ignition, as if the body itself had remembered an ancient rhythm. He nodded, took one deep breath of mountain air, and then burst forward, disappearing along the path like a dart of living energy. Behind him, the first runner sat down on a smooth stone bench. Only now did he allow the weight of the journey to settle onto his shoulders. He watched the path winding toward the horizon and thought about the strange power they carried with them. Centuries from now, people might invent energy gels, protein bars, and neon-colored drinks. But they already had everything they needed, crafted by farmers, perfected by experience, and trusted by an empire. He listened to the wind whistle through the valley and felt a quiet pride. Their lives were not easy. Every run was a test. But with every message delivered, every mountain crossed, and every handful of the sacred food consumed, they were building something far larger than themselves. A living network, an empire connected not by roads, but by the sheer endurance of the human spirit. And so, as the sun dipped behind the towering Andes, painting the sky in amber and rose, the runner closed his eyes. He knew that by dawn, he would rise again, tighten his sandals, take a share of the food, and continue the endless pulse of the empire. One stride, one breath, one glowing ember of strength at a time. Night settled slowly over the Andes, not as a sudden darkness, but as a deepening blue that swept through the valleys like a quiet tide. The second runner had already vanished into the distance hours before, but the network of relay stations hummed with movement. Across the empire, dozens of other runners were doing exactly the same thing, passing messages, consuming small bites of the sacred food, and keeping the lifeblood of the Inca civilization flowing without pause. Farther along the route, the young runner reached a stretch of forest where the moonlight barely touched the ground. The canopy above was so dense it felt like a cathedral of shadows, and every sound, crickets, rustling branches, the distant hoot of an owl, seemed amplified in the darkness. His breathing remained steady, but the path ahead grew steep, twisting like a serpent between the trees. Even so, he never slowed. The energy from the earlier meal burned warmly in his chest, a steady fire pushing him onward. When he finally broke free of the forest, the world opened before him in a wide, starlit valley. Here, dozens of terraced farms cascaded down the hillsides, glowing faintly under the night sky. Farmers had long since gone home, but the scent of freshly cut quinoa drifted on the breeze, mingling with the cold smell of stone and running water. At the heart of the valley stood a larger tambo, lit by a single torch flickering beside its entrance. A guard waited there, wrapped in a thick woolen cloak, his silhouette unmoving. As the runner approached, the guard lifted the torch slightly, casting warm light over the young man's sweat-streaked face. "Message from the coast?" the guard asked. The runner nodded and held out the quipu pouch. The guard accepted it with both hands, bowing his head briefly, an acknowledgement of the miles traveled and the miles still ahead. Then he handed the runner a fresh packet of the sacred food. Thick, pale squares made from ground maize, mixed with quinoa, seeds, and just enough natural sweetener to keep it soft. The runner hesitated. He wasn't required to continue. A fresh runner waited inside. But something in him felt restless, like his legs still carried the momentum of the forest, the mountains, the wind. He broke off a piece of the food, chewed slowly, and felt that familiar warmth spread through his limbs. "I'll take the next leg," he said quietly. The guard smiled knowingly. "The Empire thanks you." Moments later, the runner tightened his sandals, stepped out into the moonlit valley, and sprinted toward the opposite ridge. His silhouette moved like a flicker of flame against the starlit horizon, small, fragile, but fiercely alive. And somewhere far ahead, another runner waited, ready to take the next piece of the message, ready to keep the ancient relay burning bright. The Empire did not sleep, and neither did its runners. The night deepened as the runner made his way across the valley floor, each step soft against the packed earth. Far above him, the stars shone with a clarity that only high mountains could grant, sharp, white points scattered across the velvet sky like grains of salt. To him, those stars were more than decoration. They were familiar guides, quiet companions that had watched generations of runners trace these same paths, carrying threads of communication that tied the empire together. As he jogged steadily forward, his breath formed faint clouds in the cold air. The valley's irrigation canals whispered alongside him, narrow channels of moonlit water winding between terraced fields like silver ribbons. Every now and then, the sound of running water was interrupted by the low croak of a night frog or the soft rustle of wind through maize stalks left standing after the recent harvest. Even when he ran alone, the world felt full. Beyond the valley rose another steep ascent, a ridge layered with ancient stone steps carved so long ago that moss had begun reclaiming their edges. The runner paused at the base, rolling his shoulders, feeling the lingering warmth of the energy bar still spreading through his muscles. He bent slightly at the waist, took in a slow breath scented with wet earth and night-blooming flowers, and then launched himself upward. The climb was grueling but familiar. The steps rose in tight, winding patterns that forced short, rhythmic strides. Each step echoed softly, sandals tapping stone, tapping moss, tapping stone again. His calves burned, but in a comforting way, like a fire crackling steadily rather than roaring out of control. His mind slipped into a gentle lull, focusing only on the rising and falling of his feet. The world narrowed to movement and breath. Halfway up, the path widened into a small overlook. He stopped for only a moment, resting a hand on a cool boulder and turning his gaze toward the valley he had just crossed. From here, it looked peaceful. Black silhouettes of terraces stacked with geometric precision, the faint orange glow of the torch of the Tambo, and above it all the shimmering Southern Cross anchored among a field of stars. Sometimes, on clear nights like this, he imagined that he could see the entire empire at once. Every mountain pass, every farming village, every distant coastal town where fishermen pulled nets from the sea at sunrise. He liked to think the empire breathed with him, inhaling as he climbed, exhaling as he descended, its heartbeat synchronized to the cadence of the runners who kept messages flowing. He started upward again, feeling renewed. Near the top of the ridge, the path leveled out and the wind picked up, colder now and carrying a hint of snow from the higher peaks. At this altitude, vegetation thinned dramatically. The ground became rocky and open, dotted only with hardy tufts of ichu grass that swayed in the breeze like pale golden fur. Llamas sometimes wandered these heights during the day, but at night they huddled together near their handlers in lower pastures. Up here, the only movement was the grass and the wind. As he crossed the crest, the landscape ahead revealed itself. A long, descending slope leading toward a cluster of small clay homes perched near the edge of a mountain lake. The lake looked dark at this hour, absorbing all the moonlight without reflecting it, as though storing it for dawn. Thin wisps of smoke drifted from one or two chimneys, families burning the last of their evening fires. The runner slowed slightly. This hamlet was known for its hospitality, especially toward Chaskies like him. They understood the importance of his work, and though he expected nothing, someone often stepped out to offer him a fresh gourd of water or a handful of toasted corn kernels. The thought of the warm smiles and the gentle kindness of those villagers eased something inside him, softening the solitude of night travel. When he reached the first home, a thin line of smoke curled from a chimney, smelling faintly of cedar and herbs. A dog lifted its head from the doorway, blinking sleepily at the approaching runner, but didn't bark. It seemed to recognize his posture, the telltale rhythm of his footsteps, the confident way he carried the kipu pouch. A moment later, an elderly woman pushed aside the woven door curtain. Her hair, long and silver, hung in two thick braids down her chest. She wore a deep indigo shawl speckled with tiny stitched stars, an old pattern, one she must have learned from her grandmother. Her eyes crinkled warmly when she saw him. "Another message on the road tonight?" she asked in a soft, musical tone. The runner nodded. "Still a long way to go." "Come," she said, stepping aside. "A sip of warm water will help the cold pass more gently through you." He hesitated only briefly. A runner's schedule was precise, but kindness was its own form of nourishment, and he knew the stop wouldn't cost him much time. He entered the small home, letting the warmth wash over him. The interior glowed with golden firelight. Clay pots lined the walls, and a low wooden table held a bowl of quinoa soup that still steamed faintly. He declined the soup, having eaten recently, but accepted the warm water gratefully. As he drank, the woman watched him with eyes full of quiet pride. "My grandson became a runner last season," she said. "Not as fast as the young ones yet, but he tries. Every night, he prays to the stars that he will carry a message as far as you do." The runner smiled, wiping condensation from the rim of the gourd. "Tell him the road teaches speed. The stars simply keep us company along the way." She laughed gently, pleased with the answer. He thanked her, placed the gourd back on the table, and stepped into the night again. The air felt colder after the warmth of the home, but his spirit felt lighter, buoyed by the familiarity of human connection. The descent toward the lake went smoothly. Gravel crunched under his sandals, and the wind rippled across the lake's surface, creating tiny waves that caught the moonlight in scattered glimmers. As he moved, the reflection of the stars seemed to race alongside him, as if the sky itself were keeping pace on the water. When he reached the far end of the lake, the path veered upward once more, winding toward another tambo nestled inside a rocky cliffside. A fire burned outside its entrance, casting shadows that flickered like living things against the stone. Two guards stood beside the fire, wrapped in thick wool cloaks, their spears planted firmly in the ground. They straightened when they saw him approach, their expressions sharpening with recognition. "You've come far," one guard said, "and quickly. Messages move as fast as they must." The runner replied with a small, tired smile. Inside the tambo, the next runner waited, tall, broad-shouldered, and already tightening his sandals. His eyes met the young runners with a spark of camaraderie that needed no words. The transition was smooth, pouch exchanged, instructions shared in a few hushed breaths, and then the next runner vanished into the darkness like an arrow shot from a bow. The young runner finally allowed himself to sit. Not collapse, not stumble, just sit, steady and controlled, back against a warm stone wall. His body tingled with exhaustion and pride. He had carried his message farther than required, farther than expected, and the Empire would continue beating forward because of runners like him. Outside, the wind hummed softly against the rocks, as though singing a lullaby meant only for the Chaskies who kept the night alive. And for the first time in hours, the young runner closed his eyes. You wake several hours later, not with the explosive jolt of alarm, but with that gentle, foggy heaviness that comes after a long run and a warm room. The tambo still holds a faint glow from the embers in the hearth, and for a moment you simply breathe in the earthy scent of clay walls, dried herbs, and old smoke. Your legs feel warm and loose, pleasantly fatigued, like they've finally caught up with your ambition. The night outside has thinned into a deep ultramarine blue, the color that appears just before dawn, when the world hasn't quite decided whether it should keep dreaming or start waking. You rise slowly, stretching your arms toward the timber beams overhead. The floor beneath your sandals is cool stone, smoothed by generations of runners who passed through this very room. You can almost imagine their conversations lingering in the air. Quick exchanges of route conditions, weather warnings, or a shared joke about how even the strongest Chaska sometimes tripped over a loose pebble. You step outside into the crisp pre-dawn air, feeling it wash over your face like clean mountain water. A faint glow forms along the horizon, the earliest hint of sunrise. High altitude, birds begin to stir, their calls echoing faintly across the cliffs. Though your main message has already been passed to the next runner, your journey isn't finished. As was common for Chaskies, you're expected to continue to the next village to check on supply inventories, an extra task that keeps the road functioning smoothly. Many runners did more than carry information. They often served as inspectors, scouts, and messengers for local logistics. It's a historical fact that Inca road maintenance was incredibly organized, with teams assigned to inspect bridges, terraces, irrigation channels, and storehouses on a remarkably strict schedule. You're part of that rhythm now. After splashing cold water on your face from Stone Basin outside the tambo, you begin your descent toward the lower valley. The path curls through fields of tall quinoa plants, their seed heads swaying gently in the morning breeze like clusters of tiny lanterns. As the light increases, colors return to the world. Soft rose over the cliffs, golden streaks across the terraces, deep green shadows lingering under the trees. You feel as though you're walking through a painting being slowly filled in by an invisible hand. The first village on your route is awake by the time you arrive. Children chase each other between the houses, their laughter carrying through the cool air. A group of men are already at work repairing a stone irrigation canal that runs like a spine down the hillside. You're greeted with nods and warm smiles. People here understand the value of the runners. They know that without chasquis linking every corner of the empire, the entire system would falter. Even the smallest village relies on the network to move goods, communicate needs, and respond to emergencies quickly. A woman in a saffron-colored shawl approaches you with a woven basket containing roasted coca leaves and a handful of dried papaya slices. "For your strength," she says. The coca is traditional, a natural mild stimulant used across the Andes to help runners manage altitude and fatigue. You tuck some into your cheek and feel a slow wave of clarity spread through your body. The dried papaya is a little less traditional, one of those quirky local improvisations the official manuals never mention. Some villages swear fruit helps smooth the breath. Whether or not that's true, the sweetness is welcome. After taking stock of the village's storehouse, counting sacks of potatoes, quinoa, dried meat, and maize, you continue along the road. The next leg is gentle at first, a wide trail lined with mossy stones and wildflowers, but soon it narrows into a steep ascent hugging the side of a massive cliff. Below you, the valley drops sharply, offering a sweeping view of farmland divided into terraced parchment-colored squares. From up here, they almost look like pages of a storybook set into the mountain. You climb steadily, leaning forward against the incline, feeling each muscle respond with familiarity and trust. Running this road doesn't feel like a battle anymore. It feels like a dance with gravity, where each step has its place. You think back to the woman's comment about her grandson and smile. Every new runner carried a mixture of pride and nerves, much like you did when you began. You can still remember the advice your older brother gave. The mountains don't care how fast you are. They only care that you keep moving. Halfway up the cliffside path, the wind strengthens, sweeping across the rock face with a low, hollow moan. A group of condors circles overhead, their wings spanning wider than your outstretched arms. They glide effortlessly, barely flapping, simply letting the wind do the work. Historians still argue whether Inca messengers studied the flight paths of condors to predict weather patterns. Some say the birds were omens. Others insist the chasquis simply used practical observation. But watching them now, you wonder if the truth isn't a bit of both. At the top of the ascent, you pause, hands braced on your thighs, and look out across the landscape. The sun has now cleared the horizon, casting warm gold across the granite peaks and illuminating distant snowcaps like crowns of light. You breathe in deeply, letting the cold air fill your lungs. The world feels vast and silent in a way that nudges you toward humility. Continuing on, you reach a flat plateau dotted with low shrubs and grazing llamas. Shepherds wave at you from afar, their russet cloaks fluttering like banners. A few of them walk over, curious about your journey. They offer simple greetings and ask whether the Empire's news is good or troubling. You can't tell them any details, protocol is strict, but you offer a reassuring smile. It's enough, and you linger for a moment longer than you need to, enjoying the simple warmth of their company before pressing on. Your route arcs toward a narrow bridge made of woven vines stretched across a deep canyon. The bridge sways slightly in the wind, creaking in protest as you place your first step. These rope bridges were engineering marvels, renewed every year by local communities. You grip the side netting as you cross, feeling the tension of the vines beneath your sandals. Each step resonates through the structure, and for a moment it feels like you're suspended not just between two cliffs, but between two worlds, one of solid ground, one of empty sky. Reaching the other side, you let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. The road continues, winding across the high plateau. The sun warms your shoulders, and the coca leaves soften the sting of the climb. You fall into a steady pace once more, your body remembering the rhythm, even when your mind wanders. And as you run, The empire awakens beneath the expanding light. Villages stirring, fires rekindling, markets preparing their stalls. The same roads you follow will soon fill with traders, farmers, musicians, soldiers, and wandering storytellers. But for now, in this moment of transition between night and day, the road belongs entirely to you, and it feels like a privilege. By midday, the high plateau begins to shimmer with waves of heat, the kind that bend the air until distant stones look like slow-moving animals. You adjust the strap of your sling pouch, feeling the gentle weight of the remaining energy blocks tapping against your hip. Even though the sacred food is meant for function rather than flavor, you can't help smiling at its oddly comforting presence. It's basically the closest thing the Empire has to a friend who always remembers to pack snacks. The trail ahead splits into two lines, one leading toward a cluster of small farms, the other rising sharply toward a mountain pass. You follow the upper path, knowing the next tambo lies at the crest. Your legs carry you steadily upward, and the rush of cold wind at this elevation feels like nature holding a wet cloth to your forehead. You breathe slowly, rhythmically, letting each step fall into its place on the ancient road. The stones beneath you are smooth from centuries of foot traffic, each one worn by runners like you, who kept the Empire connected long before messengers rode on horseback anywhere else in the world. It's a historical fact the Inca preferred runners to horses, not because they ignored the idea, but because the Andes simply weren't kind to hoofed animals. As you climb, you pass a small shrine built into a natural crevice of the mountain. Tiny figurines carved from stone and bone sit nestled along the ledge, offerings left for the local spirits who guard travelers. A few bright feathers flutter beside them in the wind, tied with red thread. One looks suspiciously like a parrot feather, not exactly a bird native to this altitude, so someone clearly carried it a long way for good luck. You place a pebble among the offerings, not because you're required to, but because there's something calming about honoring traditions that have walked beside the road longer than any empire. Farther up the trail, a strange whistling sound rises from the cliffs. At first, you think it's just the wind threading through cracks in the rock, but as you listen more closely, you realize it's rhythmic, almost melodic. When you round the bend, the source becomes clear. A boy perched on a boulder, blowing into a long reed flute. He sits entirely alone, as though performing for the mountains themselves. His tune is playful, light, and slightly chaotic, as if he's half musician, half troublemaker. The music drifts over the path like braided strands of air. He pauses when he notices you and lifts the flute in greeting. You wave back. He shouts, "Are you a Chaska?" You nod. He grins broadly, clearly impressed, and then calls out, "My uncle says you're faster than llamas, but I don't believe him. Llamas look pretty fast." You laugh, remembering how llamas actually run in a stiff-legged bounce that's equal parts adorable and chaotic. "Sometimes we are," you answer, and he gives a skeptical squint before returning to his tune. The sound lingers as you continue upward. Music has always traveled these roads. Some tambo keepers carried panpipes. Others beat small hand drums during festivals. Historians still argue whether runners used whistled signals to communicate across valleys. Some claim it was common practice. Others insist it's a romanticized myth. But considering how well sound travels in these mountains, you wouldn't be surprised if a few Chaskies had secret sonic shortcuts. When you finally reach the mountain pass, the view is nothing short of enormous. The earth seems to drop away on both sides. To your left lie sprawling terraces arranged like giant green staircases. To your right rise towering peaks dashed with snow, their ridges catching sunlight like polished silver. You stop for a moment to take it all in, pressing your palm against a warm slab of stone to anchor yourself. The wind here moves constantly, brushing your tunic so persistently it feels like a friend trying to get your attention. The tambo sits farther along the ridge, a sturdy structure built of stone blocks fitted so perfectly they don't need mortar. Two keepers wait outside, one elderly man with a long braided beard, and a younger woman wearing a teal headband that snaps in the wind. Both greet you warmly as you arrive. The man hands you a small gourd filled with cool chicha, a light maize drink slightly sour from fermentation. The first sip feels like sunlight trapped in liquid. Inside, the tambo is surprisingly spacious. Clay jars line the walls, each holding grains, dried meat, or medicinal herbs. A large loom sits in one corner, half covered with a tapestry depicting a mountain, a condor, and a winding road. The younger keeper notices you admiring it and says, "My sister is weaving the story of our region." Each symbol is a piece of memory. You approach to touch the edge of the fabric, feeling the texture of alpaca wool beneath your fingers. The design is intricate, the colors earthy and warm. You comment that it must have taken countless hours. She nods proudly. The older keeper gestures to a wooden tray containing small squares of the Chaska energy blend. These ones look darker than usual, flecked with tiny green herbs. He notices your confusion and chuckles. "We mix in local mint. Helps with altitude, and it keeps your breath from scaring the condors." You raise an eyebrow, amused. He adds, "Mint doesn't grow this high, so we trade for it." A rare treat. You take a piece, finding that it has a refreshing coolness that spreads through your mouth, clearing your head like an unexpected breeze. After a brief rest, you join the keepers in the back courtyard of the tambo. The woman shows you a series of stone channels redirecting water from a nearby spring. Some feed into drinking troughs. Others irrigate small gardens of potatoes and herbs. She explains how the empire maintains these systems, describing the rotating groups of workers, the strict inspection schedules, and the importance of keeping the water pure for travelers. Her explanation is both practical and poetic, reminding you that the Inca didn't just build roads. They cultivated entire ecosystems around them. You help with a few chores, filling water jars, carrying firewood, tightening the lashings on a llama pack, partly because Chaskies often assisted tambo keepers when needed, and partly because it feels grounding after so many miles. Even the simple act of stacking wood in the right direction becomes a meditation. When it's time to continue, the keepers walk with you to the edge of the ridge. The wind is stronger now, tugging at your tunic, carrying scents of snow and wild grass. The older man places a hand on your shoulder and says, "The road trusts those who respect it. Travel steady, travel true." You nod with quiet gratitude before stepping forward onto the long, descending path. Below you, the world is a vast patchwork of valleys and ridges, rivers twisting like silver threads. You take a deep breath, feeling the mint still lingering in your throat, and begin the next descent, your strides light and sure. Each step feels like brushing against the pulse of the empire, a rhythm older than kingdoms, older than memory, but somehow still alive beneath your feet. And as you run, you realize something subtle. You're no longer just following the road. The road is running with you. Night had fully settled over the Andes by the time our young Chaska, Amaru, reached the next checkpoint hut, a small stone shelter perched on a ridge that felt almost impossibly narrow, as if it balanced between the world of the living and something far more ancient. The wind, cool and thin, whispered around him in threads, weaving through the grass and tugging gently at his hair like unseen fingers. Down below, 1,000 dark valleys folded into each other, each one harboring its own stories, its own ghosts, its own silent watchers. Amaru slowed his pace. His heart was still beating fast. Not from fatigue exactly, because his body was trained for distances most people couldn't dream of, but from the intensity that always came with running alone at night. The Andes at night were beautiful, yes, but they were also enormous, overwhelming, vast in a way that made even the bravest runners feel like sparks drifting through a giant, unseen world. He stepped inside the tambo hut, letting the quiet embrace him. Here, the night wind softened. The stone walls trapped the leftover warmth from the last Chaska who had passed through, maybe only an hour earlier. A clay torch flickered in the corner, its flame dancing in slow, lazy waves that painted the room gold. Amaru sat. He didn't rush. That was the secret no one saw in the glory-filled stories the Empire told about its lightning-fast messengers. The quipu knots carried on woven cords weren't only about speed. They were about endurance, rhythm, control, wisdom enough to rest for minutes so you could run for hours. He took a deep breath, then another. This moment, the stillness that came right after intense motion, was something only Chaskies truly understood. It was like stepping out of one world and into another. When you ran, you were pure fire and wind. You were focused entirely on your heartbeat, your breath, the shift of your muscles, the path ahead. But when you stopped, when you let yourself settle into the soft edges of silence, it felt like the whole mountain exhaled with you. Amaru loosened the cord around his waist and pulled out a small woven pouch. Inside were his Iroquois, the energy bites every Chaska carried and guarded like treasure. They looked incredibly simple, small, rough cubes made from ground maize, chia, muru berries, and the tiniest hint of honey that only the higher-ranking messengers had access to. But simple didn't mean ordinary. These little squares had powered the feet of an empire. He placed one on his tongue, letting it soften slowly. The sweetness reached him first, soft, warm, comforting. Then came the earthy depth of corn, followed by a subtle brightness from the berries. And finally that unmistakable lift from the chia, the same seeds Incan runners swore could keep a person going long after exhaustion should have claimed them. As the flavors bloomed in his mouth, Amaru felt strength trickling back into him. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily, like a river quietly filling a valley after rainfall. He didn't think of it as fuel. He thought of it as connection. Every bite linked him to countless runners who had traveled these same paths long before him. Messengers who had carried news of war, peace, harvests, births, omens, celebrations. Some who had carried warnings that arrived just in time. Some who had carried messages that changed nothing at all. But they ran anyway, and so did he. Amaru rested his head back against the stone wall and let his eyes drift half shut. Outside, the night sent the soft sound of distant wind chimes, though there were no chimes. It was only the reeds brushing each other. But to a tired runner, it sounded melodic, protective, almost intentional. He thought of his mentor, Yupanqui, the old Chaska who had taught him everything. How to time messages into quipus, how to breathe properly when climbing altitude, how to read the mountains not as obstacles, but as living companions. But the lesson that returned to him most often on nights like this was one Yupanqui had repeated dozens of times. Courage isn't the moment you run fast. Courage is the moment you choose to keep going. Amaru felt the truth of that settle deep in his chest, because no one saw the quiet part. People cheered for the sprint, the heroic arrival, the dramatic handoff of a message. But they didn't see the lonely hours, the cold ridges, the nights when fog swallowed the path, the mornings when the sun rose but warmth didn't come with it, the footsteps taken even when fear clung to your ribs like frost. Yet these were the moments where courage lived. He finished his energy bite and stood again, rolling his shoulders. His body felt renewed. Not fully, because no Chaska ever reached perfect comfort out here, but enough. Enough to continue. Enough to expand again into movement and purpose. He tied the message cord carefully around his chest this time, securing it under his shoulder wrap so it wouldn't shift or snag as he ran. The quipu knots inside represented something important. Amaru didn't know exactly what, because Chaskis never read the messages they carried. But he knew it had weight. Every message did. He stepped back into the night, and immediately, he felt the scale of the world around him again. The sky was clear now, perfectly clear, revealing stars so thick they looked like grains of salt scattered across black marble. The Milky Way arched overhead like a river of frost, and the moon, almost full, balanced low on the horizon, casting silver light along the path he would follow. Amaru breathed in the cold, crisp air. His body responded, his mind sharpened, and the quiet courage, deep, ancient, unspoken, rose in him like a tide. He began to run, and with each step, he carried more than a message. He carried centuries, traditions, the memory of thousands of Chaskis who had turned the vast Andes into a living highway of communication, and the humble power of those tiny energy snacks, the early power bars that sustained an entire empire one runner at a time. The mountain wind met him again, but this time he didn't feel small. He felt guided, supported, part of something immense, beautiful, and enduring. And so he continued into the night, his footsteps steady, his breath calm, his purpose clear, as though the mountains themselves had chosen him to carry their stories forward. The path ahead of Amaru curved like a silver thread stitched into the fabric of the mountainside. Moonlight flowed across the stones, giving everything a quiet, mystic glow. The air was thinner here, so thin it felt as though every breath he took was something borrowed, something the Andes allowed only for those who respected them. But Amaru had been running these routes long enough to understand the rhythm of the mountains. He had learned, slowly and with reverence, that the Andes were not obstacles, they were companions. As he descended from the ridge, the sound of his footsteps softened. The rocky slopes gave way to patches of grass and hard-packed earth that cushioned each stride. Shadows pooled on either side of the path like sleeping giants, their shapes shifting gently with the wind. In the distance, he could hear water, a thin, crystalline stream that ran down from the peaks, cutting through the earth with a melody as old as the stones themselves. Amaru allowed his breathing to settle into its familiar cadence. In 2 steps, out 2 steps, repeat, repeat again. To outsiders, running through the Andes might seem reckless, even impossible. But to a Chaska, it was second nature, a conversation between body and landscape, a delicate give and take. And on nights like this, when the sky was clear and the wind was calm, it felt almost sacred. He remembered the stories told by his grandmother when he was small, tales of the Apis, the mountain spirits who protected travelers. She had told him that the Apis watched every runner, every farmer, every shepherd who dared step onto the highlands, not with judgment, but with curiosity. These spirits, she said, listened to footsteps. They listened to breath. And they always appeared when someone ran with a pure heart or carried a message of great importance. Tonight, Amaru felt the Apis listening, not in a literal sense, not as a presence he could see or touch, but as a sensation, a heaviness in the air that wasn't threatening, just ancient, a feeling that every rustle of grass, every shift of wind, every whisper of rock sliding in the distance was part of a silent conversation happening all around him. He pressed forward. The path narrowed again, and the world below opened into a deep valley, so wide it seemed to stretch into another realm entirely. The moon traced highlights along its edges, revealing winding rivers, clusters of terraces, and faint dots of distant villages where warm fires flickered inside round stone houses. For a moment, Amaru slowed, not because he was tired, but because the sight was simply too beautiful to rush past. The Andes weren't just mountains. They were a world unto themselves, and he felt humbled, completely and utterly humbled, to be a small moving part of that world. A soft rustle of feathers overhead made him glance up. A night bird, large, slow-winged, almost silent, glided across the sky. In Inca tradition, birds were messengers too. Some believed they were the spirits of past Chaskis, still running their ancient routes in the sky, still guarding the paths below. Amaru watched the bird fade into the darkness. Then he ran again. His body moved with the ease of someone who had grown up in motion. Every muscle, every tendon, every bone understood exactly what to do. His feet landed lightly, his arms swung in balanced rhythm, his breath stayed steady and smooth. Even fatigue, that old and familiar companion, didn't frighten him. He had learned long ago that exhaustion came in waves, and that every wave eventually passed. But what never passed was the discipline, the quiet strength, the calm determination, the understanding that every message mattered. Amaru touched the quipu gently through his tunic, feeling the texture of the knots. He didn't know whether the message was one of urgency or celebration, but he knew this. Somewhere, someone was waiting. Someone depended on him, on his feet, his endurance, his commitment, to deliver information that could shift the course of a day, a season, or an entire village's future. That responsibility steadied him. He blinked, adjusting his eyes to the deepening shadows as the moon drifted behind a passing cloud. The world dimmed, but not enough to frighten him. Chaskis trained for this. They learned the paths not visually, but sensorially, by memory, by muscle, by instinct. Amaru could almost feel the right direction before he saw it. When the cloud moved on, moonlight returned, and with it came a faint glimmer, a reflection of something metallic in the distance. He narrowed his eyes. It was the next checkpoint tower. Tall, thin, built from stone blocks carved with geometric patterns, and topped with a polished sheet of metal designed to catch sunlight during the day and moonlight at night. From that perch point, the next relay runner would be watching, waiting to hear the soft thrum of approaching footsteps. Amaru felt a swell of energy inside him. Not excitement exactly, but purpose, a sense of nearing something important. He quickened his pace. The ground beneath him shifted again, becoming steeper and dotted with loose stones. He adjusted, leaning forward slightly, shortening his steps. The night wind picked up, brushing across his cheeks with a cool intensity that woke every nerve. He welcomed it. The chill made him sharper, more alert, more connected to the world around him. As he ran, the faint smell of burning wood reached him. Someone had lit a small fire near the checkpoint tower. That meant warmth, light, and another runner ready to take the message farther. But Amaru wasn't finished yet. He still had to reach the tower's foot, still had to deliver the quipu with the grace and precision expected from a trained Chaska. He imagined the next runner rising from his seated position, tightening his sandals, adjusting his shoulder strap. He imagined the exchange, the brief meeting of eyes, the nod, the silent understanding between two people bound by the same duty. He pushed harder. His footsteps echoed softly in the valley. His shadow stretched and shortened with each rise and dip of the terrain. And for a moment, just a moment, he felt something shift inside him. A realization, a truth. He wasn't just running through the Andes. He was running with them, running with their wind, with their silence, with their stories, with the thousands of spirits, living and dead, who had shaped these paths over centuries. And as he neared the checkpoint tower, he felt the mountains listening more intently than ever. Not because they expected anything grand from him, but because they recognized the quiet courage it took to keep moving, step after step, mile after mile, through the dark. He reached the base of the tower. The fire crackled softly. A figure rose to greet him. Amaru slowed, but only by choice, not necessity, because inside him still burned the strength of the mountains, the endurance of his ancestors, and the subtle, unwavering power of the simple energy snacks that had carried generations of runners across impossible landscapes. His task was not finished, but another runner waited, and the Andes were listening. The morning mist had begun its slow crawl across the mountains as you pressed forward, the path narrowing to barely more than a single track carved into the side of the slope. Each step is deliberate, each breath carefully measured. You feel the familiar rhythm of the quipu against your chest, the small weight of it reminding you that your feet carry more than your body. They carry messages, hopes, and tiny shards of trust between villages, towns, and the distant seat of power. Even the tiniest misstep, a slip on damp stone or loose gravel, could ripple down the route, delaying news or instructions vital to the Empire's careful balance. You pause briefly at the edge of a ridge, peering into a hidden valley below, where the sun has just begun to touch the earth in shy, golden beams. Terraces stack like giant staircases on the valley floor, the patchwork of green and ochre interrupted by small thatched homes, smoke curling lazily from chimneys, and the occasional flash of a farmer's tunic moving among fields. It is breathtaking, not just in its beauty but in its design. The Inca carved the land as carefully as they carved stone, respecting the contours, water flow, and sun exposure to maximize crops while creating a living, breathing artwork. You breathe in slowly, letting the cool, oxygen-thin air settle your thoughts, and then you move on. The trail begins a slow descent into the valley, and the mist rises in ghostly tendrils around your ankles. It smells faintly of wet stone, moss, and the tiny hints of distant fires. Sometimes the mist is so dense that the terraces below disappear entirely, replaced by a soft gray that seems to swallow sound itself. It reminds you of something your mentor once said, that the Andes have memory and personality, and that fog is simply the mountain's way of pausing time for travelers who need it most. You shake your head slightly, smiling at the idea, though part of you believes it might be true. The path seems different in the mist, quieter, almost sacred. Your steps are cushioned against the earth, each footfall muted, as if the mountains themselves are absorbing sound to watch you more closely. A lone llama crosses the trail ahead, seemingly unconcerned by your presence. It stops for a moment, tilts its head at you, then continues, its padded feet barely making a sound. You think about how llamas have always been allies to runners, sturdy, reliable, and capable of carrying loads where humans cannot. In your mind, You imagine the first Chaskies who might have used llamas to assist with supplies, their bright woven packs clattering slightly as they were transferred from llama to llama, while runners pressed on at a brisk, rhythmic pace. There's a legend that a particular llama once outpaced a Chask on a downhill stretch of the trail, prompting the runner to laugh until he was too winded to continue. Historians still argue whether these stories were embellished for amusement or if some extraordinarily speedy llamas truly existed. Either way, it's a reminder that the mountains favor those who remain aware of both human and animal companions alike. The mist gradually thins as the valley opens wider. You notice faint paths leading off to the sides, small trails the local villagers used to reach hidden terraces, water sources, or distant pastures. You resist the urge to wander. Every deviation, however small, could delay the relay, and you have a responsibility to the message you carry. Still, your eyes linger on these minor trails, imagining lives lived quietly, almost invisibly, parallel to the grand network of the Inca Empire. Farmers sowing seeds in terraces so carefully measured, children racing along mud paths, elderly women carrying water jars from the spring, all of them unwitting contributors to the rhythm you maintain, every step you take honoring their diligence and quiet labor. You pause briefly at a small spring tucked beneath a grove of wind-bent trees. The water is crystalline, flowing over smooth stones and catching faint sunbeams that penetrate the mist. You kneel to sip, the cold liquid shocking and comforting at once, invigorating your body as the energy from the sacred food still hums in your veins. This moment is delicate, suspended, like a small island of calm in the vast expanse of mountain and valley. Around you, the world is hushed, only the quiet gurgle of water breaking the silence. You realize for a fleeting second that the Inca roads were designed not only for speed but for rhythm, a balance of exertion and pause, movement and stillness, a cadence that both body and mind could sustain over long distances. Rising, you continue along the trail. The valley stretches out below you, dotted with crops in shades of green, gold, and russet, each plot carefully segmented by low stone walls that act as windbreaks. A farmer waves from a terrace. You wave back, mindful to keep your pace steady. Even in passing, these brief human interactions are part of the invisible choreography of the empire, moments that punctuate the long stretches of solitude you endure on the trail. The roads are silent witnesses to these lives, the runners, the animals, and the daily toil of people whose labor you carry in every step. The concept of a message extends beyond the corded quipu. You carry the trust, labor, and daily reality of civilization in motion. The path narrows again as it begins to rise toward another series of cliffs. You navigate carefully, your sandals gripping uneven stone. Here, the wind is stronger, threading through narrow canyons like a living thing. You think about the stories of runners who have run these trails in storms, carrying messages of famine, celebration, or warning. The mist sometimes hides dangers, a loose stone, a sudden drop, but you move with calm precision, each step deliberate. You reflect that perhaps courage isn't the absence of fear, perhaps it's knowing the risks and moving forward anyway. Along the cliffside, you encounter an unusual sight. A small offering left in a niche of rock, a bundle of feathers, a tiny carved figure, and some dried maize kernels. Villagers place these offerings for travelers and spirits alike. You pause, placing a small stone atop the bundle. A subtle ritual, barely noticeable, yet comforting. It is a reminder that this landscape is not merely geographic. It is spiritual, alive with both human and unseen presence. The mountains are not passive. They are part of the message you carry. They watch. They measure. They respond. The trail widens as you approach another tambo, perched on a ledge halfway up the next ridge. The faint glow of firelight flickers against the stone walls. A few runners are already there, seated quietly, sharing whispered updates and small morsels of food. The tambo feels like a living organism. The warmth from the fire, the quiet hum of conversation, the careful movement of supplies, all orchestrated for efficiency, endurance, and survival. You allow yourself a brief moment to admire the precision, to feel the hum of community and purpose vibrating through the walls. Then you pick up your pace again. Crossing into the Tambo courtyard, you exchange nods with the keepers. One hands you a gourd of cool water. Another offers a small bundle of toasted maize and dried fruit. The combination of hydration, protein, and sweet energy feels almost ceremonial, a reminder that the network relies on small but essential rituals to keep everyone moving. You take only what you need, careful not to linger, because every second counts and the message is still in motion. Even rest is a form of responsibility. As you leave the Tambo, the sun climbs higher. Light spills over the ridges, melting lingering mist and revealing hidden paths. Shadows shrink, colors saturate, and the air warms. The valley below becomes clearer, a living map of agriculture, water channels, and settlements. You feel simultaneously small and immense, a single runner threading a thread through the tapestry of a vast empire. The rhythm of your body, the whisper of the wind, the subtle crunch of stone beneath your sandals, all fuse into a steady cadence, an ongoing dialogue with the mountains, the people, and the sky. And as you run, you remember the words your mentor spoke long ago. The mountains listen, the rivers remember, and the roads carry more than messages. They carry the courage to continue. You continue, carrying not only a quipu with knots and codes, but the living pulse of a civilization stretching across stone, and sky. The trail narrows once again as you climb, the ridge bending sharply to the left, clinging to the mountain as though the rocks themselves are holding it in place. You feel the familiar thrill of altitude. Your lungs draw in thinner air, your heart beats with a steady rhythm, and your muscles adjust instinctively to every undulation. In the distance, a thin wisp of fog clings to a hidden terrace, wrapping it in a silvery veil. For a moment, you almost imagine that the terrace itself is breathing, rising and falling with the slow, patient pulse of the mountains. You step lightly, feeling the whisper of stones beneath your sandals, the quiet texture of each slab like pages in a book written by countless feet before yours. The path opens briefly onto a plateau, and the vast panorama sprawls before you. Valleys so deep they almost seem unreal, streams glinting like liquid mirrors, and terraces stacked like delicate mosaics in colors of green, ochre, and rust. You stop for a moment, hands on your knees, letting the awe settle into your chest. Here, in this quiet, forgotten corner of the empire, you feel the pulse of life beneath the earth and stone. The air smells of damp earth, crushed herbs, and faint smoke from a distant fire. A group of llamas grazes in the distance, their movements deliberate and calm. One of them lifts its head, sniffing the wind, and you imagine it watching you, as if it understands that you're more than just a runner. Perhaps it knows that you carry history in your chest, a responsibility older than any of the stone terraces that surround you. You resume your path, stepping carefully over loose stones and low shrubs that cling stubbornly to the edge of the trail. Every so often, you run your fingers along the cool stone wall, tracing its worn edges, feeling the stories embedded in each crack. Some stones are so smooth that it feels as though centuries of feet have polished them. Others are jagged, reminding you that not every path is easy, that endurance is tested not only by distance, but by the roughness of the ground beneath you. Scholars still argue whether some Inca roads were intentionally left rough to train the Chasquis, or if it was simply a consequence of terrain and resource limitations. Either way, your focus is absolute, each step a dialogue with the mountains and the path itself. As you progress, the morning sun begins to climb, painting the rocks in gold and shadow. Light scatters across the terraces, revealing small human figures working in fields far below. Their movements are measured, deliberate, harmonious with the land, as if the mountains themselves have dictated the tempo of daily life. You catch glimpses of women carrying water jars, children running alongside them with baskets of herbs, and men tilling soil with wooden tools. Each action is part of a rhythm that stretches across generations, and you realize that your journey is entwined with theirs, a single thread connecting countless lives in a fragile but enduring web. A narrow bridge of woven vines appears ahead, spanning a small but deep gorge. The wind whistles softly through the gap, making the rope bridge sway and creak. You pause, assessing the construction. Rope bridges are marvels of Inca engineering, carefully maintained by local communities, yet they carry a quiet danger to anyone who crosses them too quickly or carelessly. You step onto the bridge slowly, feeling the fibers shift beneath your weight. Each step is deliberate, your sandals gripping the rope in a way that seems almost like a conversation. I trust you. You trust me. You glance down, seeing the sheer drop into shadowed waters below, and feel a shiver of awareness. Not fear, exactly, but respect for the scale and power of the mountains around you. Halfway across, a small bundle tied to one of the support ropes catches your eye, a tiny offering left by a traveler long before you arrived. Inside are feathers, a piece of carved stone, and a few dried seeds. You recognize it immediately as a ritual meant to honor the mountain spirits and ensure safe passage. Without touching it, you nod silently, acknowledging its presence, aware that this small act of respect is part of a larger tapestry of human belief and care. The Andes are alive in a way most people cannot perceive. Every footstep, every offering, every carefully constructed terrace contributes to the rhythm of life here. As you step off the bridge, the trail begins to wind upward again, a steep incline lined with mossy rocks and low shrubs. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of pine, damp stone, and distant flowers. You draw in deep, deliberate breaths, letting the cool air fill your lungs and sharpen your senses. Every movement is precise. Your feet land softly, your arms swing in balance, and your core muscles stabilize each step. The rhythm is hypnotic, almost meditative. You feel as though the mountains are guiding you, nudging you forward, teaching patience and endurance in equal measure. In the distance, you spot another tambo perched on a rocky outcrop. Its stone walls glow faintly in the morning light, and smoke curls lazily from its hearth. You quicken your pace slightly, feeling a subtle surge of anticipation. The keepers here will provide nourishment, water, and perhaps even a brief exchange of news from distant villages. The arrival is never dramatic. No one rushes or cheers. Yet there is always an unspoken acknowledgement of achievement, a recognition that a message has traveled another mile along its delicate chain. Reaching the tambo, you are greeted by the keepers with quiet nods. One offers you a gourd of water, the other a small bundle of toasted grains and dried fruit. You accept both, feeling the sustenance flow into your body with comforting precision. This simple ritual, hydration, nourishment, acknowledgement, anchors you in the reality of the day's journey, while reinforcing the ancient discipline that has allowed generations of Chaskis to traverse these unforgiving paths. After a brief rest, you move to inspect the tambo's storehouses, a task often assigned to passing Chaskis. You count sacks of maize, quinoa, dried meat, and other supplies, noting subtle differences between stores. Some are arranged meticulously, while others have shifted slightly in the wind or during the previous day's movements. These small observations, though minor to outsiders, ensure that the Empire's logistical network remains functional. It is remarkable to consider how these simple systems, maintained by human diligence and careful observation, sustained one of the largest empires in pre-Columbian history. Scholars still debate the exact methods used to coordinate these remote sites, but the effectiveness of a network is undeniable, and you are a small, living part of its continued success. Rising from the storehouse, you step into the courtyard. The wind brushes against your face, carrying the faint laughter of children playing in a distant village and the bray of a llama echoing through the valley. You adjust the strap of your pack and prepare to continue. Each mile feels both familiar and entirely new, a dance between past and present, human and landscape. The mountains are patient teachers, offering both challenge and reward in equal measure. The morning sun rises higher now, warming the terraces and fields below with a gentle amber glow, soft enough to illuminate without burning. You descend into a section of the valley that feels almost secretive, tucked between two jagged ridges, where sunlight spills in like a quiet blessing, highlighting the hidden gardens cultivated by villagers long before the Empire expanded to this region. Each plot is meticulously arranged. Potatoes in neat rows, quinoa stalks standing tall, herbs and wildflowers interspersed for balance. There's a rhythm here, a quiet cadence that mirrors your own footsteps. You can almost feel the ancient hands that shaped this land, the patience, care, and attention that transformed rocky soil into flourishing greenery. A faint scent of mint drifts across the path. You recognize it immediately as the local variety traded from distant valleys. It is added to energy bites for chaskies, just as the taste and smell linger in your memory now. That small, almost imperceptible sweetness, earthy, cool, and aromatic, has traveled hundreds of miles through trade networks, yet now it is here again, grounding you in this quiet moment of the day. You take a small piece of the last energy snack tucked in your tunic, letting it dissolve slowly on your tongue, savoring the flavor while your body prepares for the next stretch of trail. Every bite is both sustenance and ritual, a connection to runners who came before you, moving along the same roads, tasting the same textures, breathing the same mountain air. The path narrows again, brushing past low shrubs and occasional rocks, until you notice something unusual tucked among the terraces, a tiny niche carved into the cliffside. Inside is a bundle of offerings, feathers, carved stones, small figurines, and a handful of maize kernels tied carefully with bright thread. Villagers often leave these gifts for travelers or to honor the mountain spirits known as apis. You pause, kneeling to observe the arrangement. The care with which it was constructed speaks volumes about the faith, hope, and subtle communication that thrives in these remote regions. You leave a small stone in acknowledgement, feeling the energy of countless travelers passing through these hidden corners, each one adding to a quiet chorus that has persisted for centuries. Stepping forward again, you reach a small irrigation channel, its water flowing in smooth, deliberate curves that feed the gardens below. A woman kneels nearby, guiding water into the terraces, her hands skilled and careful. She glances up at you briefly and nods, returning to her work. Even at a distance, you can feel the quiet cooperation between human and landscape, the way the earth responds to care, the way rivers and streams are redirected with patience and skill. These channels are not merely functional. They are carefully maintained living systems, designed to sustain both people and crops in harmony with the terrain. Scholars still debate the extent to which these irrigation networks were standardized across the empire, but their effectiveness is undeniable, and their beauty is a testament to human ingenuity working in concert with nature. The trail begins to rise again, winding upward along a series of rocky ridges. You adjust your pack, feeling the slight tug of the quipu against your chest as a reminder of the message you carry. Every step upward is deliberate, muscles tightening and releasing in rhythm, mind attuned to the nuances of the trail. The stones are uneven, and some are slick from morning dew, but you move with precision, knowing that every footfall matters. The mountains are patient, yes, but also unforgiving. A moment of carelessness could have repercussions. Birds call from hidden groves, their notes sharp and melodic, echoing faintly through the valley. Their presence is both comforting and grounding, a reminder that life thrives even in these high, isolated regions. A condor glides overhead, wings spread wide, catching a thermal updraft effortlessly. You pause for a heartbeat to watch it, its shadow briefly crossing the path before it disappears into the valley. In Inca belief, condors were messengers between the earth and the heavens, carrying prayers, thoughts, and the spirits of those who had passed. You can't help but smile at the coincidence. A messenger carrying another kind of message, soaring freely above the very path you walk. Further along the trail, the path narrows and becomes more rugged, the terrain demanding more attention. Loose stones and shrubs claw at your sandals as you navigate each step carefully. You hear the distant murmur of water again, a stream hidden in the folds of the valley, glinting in the sunlight. The noise is subtle but steady, grounding you in the present while also connecting you to the countless runners who have passed through this landscape before. They, too, had listened to these natural cues, the sound of water, the scent of herbs, the subtle shifts in air pressure, to guide their movements. Reaching the next ridge, You catch sight of a small structure tucked into a natural alcove. Its stone walls are worn and weathered, but its roof is intact, woven from reeds and grass. This is another tambo, one of the smaller relay stations, yet it pulses with quiet life. Two keepers greet you with nods and a brief, shared smile, the unspoken acknowledgement of a shared responsibility. One of them offers a small gourd of chicha, lightly fermented maize drink, while the other hands you a handful of toasted maize and dried fruits. These simple offerings are profoundly sustaining, the flavors familiar and comforting, reconnecting you to the broader network of runners, keepers, and villagers. You pause to rest briefly, leaning against the stone wall. The sun has risen fully now, warming your skin, drying the morning dew from the rocks, and casting long shadows across the terraces below. The combination of light, warmth, and quiet rhythm of your journey creates a meditative state. You reflect on the small acts that make these journeys possible. The careful arrangement of terraces, the irrigation channels directing life-giving water, the offerings for apis, and the energy bites that sustain your body. Each detail, seemingly minor, is part of a larger tapestry of movement, endurance, and trust. After a short moment, you continue, stepping lightly onto the trail once more. The path becomes a gentle descent, offering glimpses of distant valleys, rivers glinting like silver threads, and far-off villages. You feel the pulse of the empire beneath your feet, the cumulative effort of countless people who have worked these terraces, carried messages, and cultivated the land. The mountains themselves seem alive, responding subtly to your rhythm, guiding you forward with quiet patience. As you move along, you notice small, hidden niches in the rocks, tiny carvings, small offerings left behind, faint traces of travelers from centuries past. Each one is a silent story, a memory embedded in stone. You touch a small carving, tracing its shape with your fingers, imagining the hands that made it, the purpose it served, and the message it conveyed. The presence of these relics is both humbling and comforting. They remind you that you are part of a continuum, a long chain of human endurance, care, and respect for the land. And as you begin your next ascent, following the trail carved into centuries of stone, you feel the quiet pulse of the empire beneath your feet, a rhythm that connects villages, rivers, mountains, and sky into a living, breathing web. Every step is a continuation of countless others, a silent promise that messages, lives, and traditions will persist, carried forward on the courage, endurance, and determination of runners like you. The sun climbs higher, illuminating the path ahead. Terraces, streams, and villages stretch out like a living mosaic, the work of countless hands and minds over generations. And as you descend, the mountains listen. Every footstep whispers to them. Every breath resonates against stone and sky. And every message you carry binds the world together, one quiet, enduring step at a time. The day stretches ahead, the sun climbing higher, casting golden light across the landscape. You continue your journey through hidden valleys and secret gardens, each step measured, deliberate, and connected to the rhythms of the land. Your muscles are steady, your breath controlled, your mind alert yet calm. You are a single thread in a vast tapestry, carrying more than a message. You carry the pulse of life itself, woven together by stone, water, wind, and human hands. The mountains watch, silent and patient, as you move through their folds. Every stone, every stream, every terrace is a witness to your passage. And as you run, you understand something essential. The message you carry is not just the quipu, not just the knots and codes. It is endurance, memory, and connection. It is the quiet courage to continue, step by step, through mist, sunlight, and hidden gardens, across centuries and generations. You press onward, leaving the secret gardens behind, and step into the next section of the trail, your pace steady, your mind aligned with the rhythm of the mountains, and your heart carrying the legacy of all who have run before you. The trail begins to climb again, curling upward like a ribbon of stone and earth, hugging the mountain as though it were part of the terrain itself. The morning has warmed into a gentle, golden day, yet the wind here feels sharp against your face, carrying with it the scents of wet moss, sun-warmed stone, and distant wildflowers. You adjust your strap, feeling the quipu resting against your chest, the weight familiar yet insistent, a reminder of the responsibility you carry. Every knot in those cords is a pulse of communication, a heartbeat from someone far away, waiting for delivery, and you know that your feet must honor each of those silent voices. As you ascend, the path narrows to a precarious edge, flanked on one side by sheer cliffs and on the other by a drop into a valley that seems impossibly deep. The Andes are vast and patient, and in moments like this, you understand why the Chaskies were trained from youth to respect them as living, breathing entities. The wind whistles through small cracks in the cliffs, creating tones that feel almost musical. Each note echoes across the valley below, bouncing from terrace to terrace, carrying the quiet history of the land. You pause for a moment, letting the sound wash over you, listening as though the mountains themselves are speaking. Scholars still argue whether the Inca believed these echoes were messages from the Apis or if they simply noted them as natural phenomena. But in this moment, you feel both. The mountains are listening, and they are speaking. Continuing along the narrow path, you notice faint footprints beside yours. Recent, perhaps from another traveler or a llama grazing along the trail. You follow them for a short distance, not out of necessity, but because there is a certain comfort in shared passage. Someone else has moved through this space recently, leaving evidence of their existence, reminding you that you are never entirely alone, even in the remote solitude of high-altitude valleys. You imagine the conversations that might have taken place, the quick nods, the silent acknowledgments between runners and keepers of the empire. Each footprint, each subtle sign, contributes to the quiet choreography that keeps messages moving across impossible terrain. As the ridge widens slightly, you see a hidden grove of trees, their roots gripping stubbornly to rocks and soil, their branches offering occasional shade. Birds flit among the leaves, their calls sharp and melodic, while small insects hum faintly in the underbrush. You pause again, drawing in a deep, steadying breath, letting the sounds of life mingle with the rhythm of your own heartbeat. Here, in this quiet sanctuary, the world seems to hold its breath, suspended in a perfect balance between motion and stillness. You reach into your pouch, retrieving a small morsel of energy snack, a mix of maize, chia seeds, and dried berries, allowing it to dissolve slowly on your tongue. The taste is earthy, faintly sweet, and utterly grounding, reminding you of every runner who has carried messages along these trails, fueled by the same simple sustenance. The trail begins to wind downward again, descending into a valley shrouded in mist. Visibility is limited, but your muscles remember the terrain, your feet finding purchase on slippery stones and damp earth. The mist is both a veil and a guide, softening the landscape while creating a sense of intimacy, as though the mountains themselves are cradling you within their folds. In the quiet, your mind drifts to the history embedded in these stones. Centuries of travelers, laborers, and Chaskies have passed this way, leaving their marks in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Polished stone from countless feet, faint grooves where water channels were carved, small offerings tucked into crevices to honor the Apis. Each step you take connects you to that lineage, and you feel a deep sense of belonging. Halfway down the descent, the sound of rushing water grows louder. A stream, hidden among the boulders and trees, tumbles down the valley in silvery ribbons, glinting in patches of sunlight that pierce the mist. You move toward it, letting the cool air rising from the water wash over your face. Kneeling at the edge, you drink deeply, letting the crystal-clear liquid revitalize your body. The combination of hydration, altitude, and sustained motion brings a calm focus, a steady awareness that guides every step. Around you, the valley is alive, though quietly so. Birds swoop between trees, insects hum in the underbrush, and the distant terraces shimmer faintly as the sun continues its ascent. After the brief pause, you rise, continuing along the trail, as it begins to climb again toward the opposite side of the valley. Here, the terrain becomes rockier, less forgiving, demanding full attention. Each step is deliberate. Your sandals grip the uneven stone, your core stabilizes your movement, and your eyes constantly scan the path ahead. You feel the subtle feedback of your muscles, the way they remember past journeys, and the rhythm that has carried generations of runners across this same ground. The physical discipline required is matched only by mental focus, the ability to balance caution with speed, endurance with agility. As you ascend, the mist thins, revealing a series of small, cultivated terraces clinging to the cliffside. They are less formal than the major agricultural terraces in the lower valleys, but carefully maintained nonetheless. You imagine the villagers who tend them, their labor unseen yet essential, providing food not only for themselves but for runners, travelers, and neighboring communities. A faint sense of gratitude fills you for these unseen hands that have shaped and sustained the land, allowing your journey to continue uninterrupted. Even now, you feel the pulse of the empire beneath your feet, every terrace and path a testament to human ingenuity and collaboration. At the crest of the ridge, you catch sight of another tambo, perched on a rocky outcrop with the valley spread below like a living mosaic. Smoke curls gently from the hearth, and figures move with quiet purpose inside the stone structure. You feel a surge of energy, both physical and emotional, knowing that another link in the relay awaits. The tambo represents not only rest and nourishment, but also continuity, a stable node in a vast network that stretches across mountains, valleys, and sky. You approach, adjusting your pack, and are greeted with the customary nods from the keepers. One offers water, another hands you toasted maize and dried fruit, each gesture simple, yet profoundly sustaining. You pause briefly to observe the view from the tambo, the valley bathed in sunlight, the distant peaks shrouded in lingering mist, and the quiet movement of villagers tending their terraces. The beauty of the landscape is undeniable, yet its practical function is equally impressive. Each terrace, irrigation channel, and path contributes to a living system designed for endurance, communication, and survival. You take a slow, steady breath, feeling both humbled and connected, aware that your passage through this terrain is part of a larger rhythm that has persisted for centuries. After a brief rest, you prepare to continue, stepping onto the trail once more. Each stride is deliberate, each footfall measured against the memory of countless travelers who have moved this way before. The rhythm of your body, the whisper of the wind, and the subtle pulse of the mountains align into a meditative cadence. The Andes are patient, but they respond to care, focus, and respect. Every step carries weight, not just of your own body, but of history, trust, and responsibility. As the day progresses, the trail begins to descend once more, weaving through rocky gullies and narrow ledges. You feel the quiet satisfaction of rhythm, your body, the mountains, the message, and the history all in harmonious movement. Shadows lengthen in the valley below, and the air grows cooler again. You are reminded that even as the sun moves across the sky, your journey continues, carried forward by the endurance and courage that define every Chaska. The mountains watch silently, the streams echo your passage, and the trails hold the memory of countless footsteps before yours. You continue, fully aware that this is more than a path. It is a living network of history, labor, and quiet heroism, unfolding step by step beneath the vigilant gaze of the Andes. The ascent begins once again, steeper this time, demanding more from both your legs and your lungs. Each breath feels thinner than the last, each heartbeat a steady drum echoing in your chest. The trail hugs the cliff's edge, the rocky surface uneven, scattered with loose stones that clatter faintly under your sandals. You feel every contour beneath your feet, every shift in angle, every subtle change in texture. This is the kind of terrain that teaches patience, precision, and humility. Even the most seasoned runners must respect it, for a single misstep could result in a fall that the mountains would remember long after you are gone. The wind here is constant, tugging at your clothing and pushing against you in long gusts. It carries the scent of stone, snow from the higher peaks, and faint herbs growing stubbornly among the cracks. You lean slightly into it, letting it balance your stride. And for a moment, the sensation is invigorating, almost like the mountains themselves are reminding you to remain alert, to move with grace, and to honor the landscape's ancient rhythm. Scholars still argue whether the Inca intentionally designed the high passes to test endurance, or whether it was simply the only viable route through the rugged Andes. But standing here, feeling the wind and the altitude, you understand the lesson regardless. Mastery comes from harmony, not force. As you climb higher, the path narrows to barely more than a foot's width in some areas, flanked on one side by sheer cliffs that drop into clouds and mist, and on the other by jagged stone rising to the peaks. You step carefully, planting your sandals with precision, your hands brushing against low shrubs or jutting rocks for balance. It is quiet here, except for the wind, which seems to carry faint echoes, almost like voices, or perhaps the memory of travelers past. You pause for a moment, listening. The sound of rushing air, of stones settling, and of distant water channels blends into a rhythm that feels ancient, like the mountains themselves are breathing. It is easy to imagine that these peaks remember every step ever taken, storing each footfall in memory. The sun has climbed high enough to burn away lingering mist in the lower valleys, but here, near the crest, patches of fog cling stubbornly to narrow ledges, wrapping them in a ghostly embrace. You navigate each patch carefully, aware that even a small misstep could send you sliding over rocks slick with moisture. Your mind focuses entirely on the present, the placement of your foot, the tension in your calves, the subtle adjustments in your balance. This is meditation in motion, a practice honed over years, reinforced by necessity and guided by instinct. Halfway up the ridge, you notice a small alcove tucked into the cliffside, barely visible unless one is paying careful attention. Inside is a tiny shrine, a collection of offerings left by travelers long before you arrived. Feathers, carved stones, dried corn, and small bundles of herbs lie carefully arranged. You kneel briefly, touching the smooth surfaces with reverence, acknowledging the presence of those who came before. These small acts are not merely superstition. They are a way of connecting to the past, honoring the spirits of the land, and aligning your journey with centuries of tradition. You place a small pebble atop the offering, feeling the connection between your own steps and those of countless runners who have traversed this ridge before you. Continuing upward, the altitude presses more firmly against your chest. Each inhalation is an exercise in control, each exhalation a release of tension. You feel the subtle ache in your legs, the faint tremor in your calves, and yet the rhythm of running persists. Your body knows the trail, knows the path, knows the cadence required to maintain endurance in these high reaches. You have run these distances before, but the mountains are never the same twice. The wind shifts, the light changes, and even the stones seem to rearrange themselves subtly under the passage of time and seasons. A distant condor glides above the peaks, wings outstretched, riding thermals effortlessly. You watch it for a moment, feeling a strange kinship. It moves with purpose, yet seems entirely free, a messenger between earth and sky, just as you carry messages along the winding roads. The bird's shadow crosses the rocks below, a reminder that communication and connection take many forms, some visible, some ephemeral. You continue upward, letting the sight of the bird lift your spirits and steady your focus. The trail opens briefly into a plateau where the wind rushes more fiercely, whipping across rocks and low shrubs. The sun glints off patches of ice that linger in shadowed crevices, warning of subtle hazards beneath your sandals. You slow slightly, planting each foot carefully, aware that even a momentary lapse in attention could disrupt the balance you have maintained for miles. The plateau feels timeless, as if it exists outside of ordinary time, a threshold between the lower valleys and the higher peaks. You notice faint traces of stonework embedded in the cliffside, markers left by previous travelers, guideposts for those brave enough to move through these heights. They are subtle, almost invisible, yet they speak of planning, foresight, and the quiet ingenuity of human effort across generations. As you approach the highest point of the ridge, the wind grows stronger, tugging insistently at your clothing and your pack. You lean forward slightly, letting it support your motion, each step measured and deliberate. The air is thin now, every breath a concentrated effort, and yet your body has adapted, muscles and lungs working in harmony to sustain the momentum. You are aware of the centuries of runners who have crossed these same passes, their footsteps echoing faintly through the rocks, their determination ingrained into the very stone. At the crest, the trail begins to descend gently, opening into a wide valley below where sunlight spills across hidden terraces, sparkling streams, and distant tambo structures. You pause briefly, catching your breath, letting your gaze sweep across the landscape. The wind carries scents of pine, earth, and distant cooking fires from villages tucked along the valley floor. You feel the faint pulse of energy from the quipu, the silent rhythm of the message moving forward, connecting settlements, people, and lives. Continuing down, the trail weaves between boulders, patches of shrubs, and moss-covered stone, each step a dance between caution and rhythm. The wind softens as the terrain lowers, allowing your muscles to relax slightly while maintaining focus. The valleys here are silent, almost reverent, broken only by distant streams and occasional bird calls. You think about the history embedded in every stone, the countless runners who have passed this way, the small offerings left to honor the spirits of the land, and the quiet endurance required to traverse such heights. Scholars still debate whether the Inca intentionally created these high passes as tests of stamina, or if geography simply demanded it. But the lesson is clear: courage, focus, and harmony with the environment are essential. As the sun climbs higher, the valley becomes clearer, revealing the intricate layout of terraces, irrigation channels, and distant settlements. Every element reflects careful planning, observation, and respect for the land. You feel the weight of your role again, not just carrying the quipu, but embodying the continuity, resilience, and careful attention that the Inca relied upon to maintain their far-reaching empire. Each step, each breath, each calculated movement ties you to the landscape, to history, and to the unseen observers who have passed this way before. The trail continues, descending gently into a quieter section of the valley, the wind now just a soft caress against your skin. The rhythm of your body, the landscape, and the centuries of runners who have come before merge into a meditative cadence. You feel a deep sense of connection to the mountains, to the messages you carry, and to the enduring spirit of those who have maintained this vast network of communication and sustenance. With each step, you understand more profoundly that the high passes are not obstacles to overcome, but partners in the journey, demanding respect, attention, and endurance. The stones whisper their silent history. The wind echoes the footsteps of countless runners, and the valleys below promise shelter, nourishment, and the continuation of a story older than any individual. You move forward, steady and deliberate, carrying history, connection, and purpose with every stride. The trail begins its final climb before the descent into the next valley. Your legs ache from the long day, muscles tight yet steady, and every breath reminds you of the thin, crisp mountain air. You move slowly but deliberately, focusing on each footfall, on the subtle inclines and depressions in the rocky path. The sun hangs high in the sky now, spilling its light across jagged ridges, illuminating hidden terraces below, and casting long shadows across mossy stones. You pause briefly, letting your eyes sweep over the landscape. The view is breathtaking. Terraces ripple like green and ochre waves down the mountainsides. Streams glimmer like silver threads, and villages the valley floor, each connected by trails that seem almost invisible from this height. As you continue, you notice tiny alcoves in the cliff face, hidden recesses where previous travelers have left offerings. Feathers, carved stones, small bundles of dried maize, and bits of bright thread are carefully arranged in symbolic patterns. You stop for a moment, kneeling to examine one of the bundles. The care taken to prepare these offerings is remarkable. each one a silent communication to the spirits of the mountains, an acknowledgement of the risks and respect inherent in traversing these heights. You place a small pebble atop the offering, a quiet gesture linking you to the travelers of centuries past. It feels as though their presence lingers here, a subtle encouragement to continue. Scholars still debate whether these practices were intended solely as spiritual gestures, or if they also served as markers and waypoints for runners like yourself. But the effect is undeniable. The alcoves imbue the landscape with rhythm, attention, and connection. The ascent steepens again, demanding careful navigation over jagged stones and gravelly patches. You focus on your body. Your calves tighten, your core stabilizes, your lungs pull in short, deliberate breaths, and your heart beats a steady, resilient rhythm. The wind whistles across the ridge, tugging at your clothing and pack, sometimes gently, sometimes insistently, as if testing your balance and resolve. You lean slightly into it, letting it assist your motion, aware that the mountains, like the runners before you, expect respect, attentiveness, and patience. Every step is measured, every movement deliberate. A condor glides overhead, wings wide, shadow briefly stretching across the rocks at your feet. You pause for a heartbeat to watch it, imagining its silent flight as a messenger between earth and sky. In a way, you are that messenger too. Your body, your feet, your quipu are all carrying information, energy, and trust across the rugged terrain. The condor dips and turns, disappearing into a thermal, leaving you alone with the wind and the whisper of stone. The quiet companionship of the bird, even for a moment, is grounding, a subtle reminder that your journey is part of a greater natural and human network. As the trail bends around a rocky outcrop, you spot a faint groove in the cliffside, barely visible but unmistakable once noticed. It is a carved path where previous runners have placed small offerings or tied knots for messages along the way. You step carefully over it, aware that each stone has a story, that every footfall carries echoes of lives and efforts before yours. The rhythm of movement becomes meditative, foot, breath, balance, step. The mountains, in their patient watchfulness, offer a sense of timeless continuity, teaching endurance not only of body but of mind and spirit. Further along, the trail begins to descend gently into a narrow gorge, and you notice the subtle sounds of water flowing below. A stream winds its way through mossy rocks, glinting in sunlight that filters through cracks in the cliff above. You lean briefly over the edge, observing the stream, the small fish darting between stones, and the delicate plants growing along its banks. Even in the ruggedness of the Andes, life persists, quiet, determined, and interwoven with the stone, water, and air. The awareness of this continuity is comforting, a reminder that your journey, though physically demanding, is part of a living, breathing ecosystem maintained over centuries. As you descend into the gorge, the trail narrows again, the walls rising steeply on either side. You feel the weight of the quipu against your chest, the knots pressing lightly against your heart. Each one represents a message, a trust, a responsibility. You are not merely carrying food, water, and supplies. You carry connections between villages, communities, and generations. The landscape itself seems aware of your passage. The wind shifts subtly, birds stir in the underbrush, and distant streams echo faintly against the rock. Every movement, every choice, is amplified by the centuries of runners who have walked this path before. Midway through the descent, you notice a small alcove tucked into the stone. Inside, several items have been left: dried maize, bright feathers, and a tiny carved figure. You kneel briefly, placing a small stone atop the offering. The act feels both ceremonial and practical, a way to honor those who have come before and to leave a marker for those who will follow. You wonder, briefly, about the stories behind these offerings. Who placed them? What were their hopes, fears, or prayers? Scholars still argue whether these items were intended primarily as spiritual protection, navigational markers, or both. Regardless of the answer, their presence adds a subtle rhythm to your journey, a reminder that every footstep is part of a larger human narrative etched into the mountains themselves. The trail begins to widen slightly, transitioning from sheer cliffside to rolling ridges. The air warms gently, carrying the scents of pine, herbs, and sun-warmed stone. You adjust your pack, feeling the quipu settle comfortably against your chest, and continue forward. The rhythm of running here, muscle memory, breath control, and focus feels almost like a dance. Step by step, you move with intention, each motion harmonized with the land, the wind, and the history embedded in every rock and terrace. You catch sight of the next tambo perched on a high ledge overlooking the valley below. Smoke curls lazily from its hearth, and faint movement of figures can be seen through small windows. You increase your pace slightly, feeling a surge of energy from knowing that another rest and sustenance point is near. Even the smallest tambo represents continuity, a critical node in the relay system spanning the empire. It is not simply a place of food and water. It is a hub of human connection, careful planning, and survival strategy. Arriving at the tambo, the keepers greet you with quiet nods. One hands you a gourd of water, another offers a small bundle of toasted maize and dried fruit. The gestures are simple, unceremonious, yet profoundly sustaining. You allow yourself a brief moment to lean against the stone wall, taking in the panorama. Valleys stretching endlessly, terraces stacked with meticulous care, rivers winding like threads, and distant villages that rely on messages carried along these ancient paths. Each breath you take connects you to generations of runners, villagers, and keepers, a living network sustained through endurance, diligence, and trust. Finally, after the brief pause, you rise, adjusting your pack and feeling the quiet pulse of energy in your limbs. The final stretch of trail awaits, the descent into the valley below. Each step is deliberate, measured, and in harmony with the land. The wind softens, the sunlight warms, and the mountains seem to exhale with you, offering subtle encouragement. The rhythm of movement, breath, and awareness carries you forward, each footfall a continuation of history, each motion a testament to human perseverance and connection. And as you move toward the valley, you realize that every step has been more than a physical journey. It has been a meditation, a dialogue with the mountains, a communion with generations of runners, and a silent celebration of endurance, observation, and trust. The high passes, the hidden alcoves, the whispering stones, and the enduring rhythm of the trail have all imparted their lessons, guiding you to this moment. You continue, steady and deliberate, carrying history, connection, and purpose with every stride, ready to descend into the valley where the next stage of the journey will unfold. The trail begins its final descent, and the mountains shift from imposing guardians to gentle guides, funneling you toward the valley below. Your legs are heavy from the day's journey, calves and thighs fatigued, yet steady, moving in a rhythm honed over hours of careful, deliberate motion. Each footfall carries you farther down, stone giving way to dirt, dirt giving way to low vegetation, and eventually to small streams that mark the beginnings of human settlement. The air warms as you descend, carrying scents of pine, earth, herbs, and distant cooking fires from villages nestled along the valley floor. You take a deep breath, feeling the cool tension of altitude slowly ease from your chest and lungs. The valley spreads out before you in quiet, sprawling beauty. Terraces ripple in soft waves of green and ochre, meticulously maintained and feeding the communities below. Streams glint like silver threads in the sunlight, winding between clusters of stone and adobe houses, while the faint movement of villagers tending crops and livestock provides a gentle rhythm that echoes your own pace. The valley is alive yet peaceful, a tapestry woven from human care, natural resources, and centuries of continuity. Every terrace, every irrigation channel, every stone carries memory and effort, a reminder that even the smallest labor contributes to the enduring pulse of life. As you navigate the last winding paths, small alcoves appear tucked into rocks along the trail. Tiny offerings, just like the ones you encountered at higher altitudes, are carefully placed. Feathers, small carved stones, and bundles of maize, bright against the muted tones of the valley. You pause at one, kneeling briefly, adding a pebble to the arrangement. It is a quiet acknowledgement of all the runners and villagers who have come before, a gesture connecting the present to centuries of endurance, labor, and devotion. Scholars still debate whether these items were primarily ritualistic or also serve as practical markers, but you feel their presence as both spiritual guidance and subtle directional cues, an invisible thread linking past and present journeys. The path dips gently into the lower reaches of the valley, where vegetation grows thicker and the air carries a warmer, almost sweet scent. Wildflowers brush against your legs as you pass, and small birds dart through the underbrush, their movements quick and deliberate. Every sound, running water, rustling leaves, distant animal calls, interlaces with the rhythm of your steps. You realize that even in this quieter section, the mountains and valleys remain active participants, their forms, textures, and sounds guiding, warning, and encouraging you as you move. Halfway down, you cross a shallow stream, water running clear over smooth stones. You pause to drink and splash your face, the cool liquid rejuvenating your body and refreshing your mind. The water carries a taste of the high passes, faintly mineral, cool, and pure, connecting you to the distant snow and glaciers above. Each sip reminds you that the journey is sustained not only by energy snacks and human preparation, but by natural resources that have supported life in these highlands for generations. You notice small fish darting beneath the surface and faint impressions of footprints on the muddy banks, signs of wildlife that thrive quietly in shadows. The descent steepens slightly, forcing you to engage your balance and focus. Loose stones rattle beneath your sandals, and low shrubs tug gently at your clothing. Each careful step is a dance between attention and rhythm, a subtle negotiation with the terrain. The valley narrows here, creating a natural corridor that funnels sound and movement, echoing the faint whispers of the mountains above. You hear the distant call of a condor, its wings slicing through the warm air, a messenger of sky observing your passage. The echoes of its cries mingle with the subtle murmurs of the valley, creating a symphony that connects every stone, stream, and terrace along your path. As you reach the lower ridges, the villages come into sharper focus. Smoke curls lazily from hearths, children play quietly along the edges of cultivated plots, and animals, llamas, guinea pigs, chickens, move through the fields with calm precision. The human presence is subtle but unmistakable, integrated harmoniously with the surrounding landscape. You catch glimpses of villagers carrying water or moving bundles of harvested crops, their motions deliberate, rhythmic, and seemingly synchronized with the contours of the valley. It strikes you how every action, no matter how small, contributes to the continuity of life, sustenance, and communication within this intricate ecosystem. The trail begins to level out, gravel giving way to soft dirt, dirt giving way to flattened paths that connect the valley settlements. You feel the weariness of the day weighing on your muscles, yet the familiar rhythm of movement carries you forward. Each step is deliberate, each breath measured, and each glance downward reveals the work of countless generations. Terraces carved from stone, irrigation channels carefully routed, small shrines placed along the trails, and subtle markers of human ingenuity scattered throughout the valley. You are not simply a traveler. You are a living continuation of this intricate system, carrying forward the legacy of endurance, observation, and connection. Half an hour later, you approach the main village at the base of the valley. Children pause their play, curiosity flickering in their eyes as they watch you descend. The keepers of the village tambo emerge, offering a greeting that is both formal and familiar, a nod to your role in the broader network of communication. You hand over the quipu carefully, each knot and cord now entrusted to someone else, its message traveling onward through human hands and minds. The responsibility you carried, step by step, footfall by footfall, has reached its first destination, and the feeling is profound, almost spiritual. You have not merely traveled a path. You have connected lives, messages, and histories across mountains, terraces, and streams. After handing over the quipu, you are invited to rest at the tambo. The keepers offer water, toasted maize, and dried fruits, each item grounding you physically and mentally. You allow your muscles to relax, feeling the subtle ache and tightness of long hours in motion dissolve slowly. The valley spreads before you, sunlit and alive, yet calm and inviting. The perfect counterpoint to the high passes and wind-swept stones you navigated earlier. You take a moment to look back up the trail, imagining the hidden alcoves, wind-whipped ridges, and secret gardens that accompanied you along the way. Every step, every breath, every small act of observation and care contributed to a journey that is both ancient and immediate, physical and spiritual. As the sun dips lower, casting long shadows across the valley, you lie down briefly on a soft patch of grass, letting your body rest fully. The sounds of the village, children's laughter, distant animal calls, and the murmur of running water create a gentle lullaby. You feel the pulse of the Andes, the rhythm of the mountains, and the quiet energy of the people who have shaped this landscape. For a moment, the passage of time seems to slow, the history of countless runners and villages blending seamlessly with the present. Your journey has carried you across high passes, through misty valleys, along secret gardens, and past windswept stones. You have witnessed the interplay of human ingenuity, natural beauty, and quiet endurance. Every step has been deliberate, every gesture connected, and every breath a part of the living rhythm of the Andes. As night approaches, the valley cools, shadows deepen, and the first stars begin to appear in the sky, faintly glittering against the deepening blue. The mountains stand silently around you, guardians of memory, history, and continuity. You close your eyes briefly, letting the warmth of the sun, the soft sounds of the valley, and the satisfaction of a completed journey wash over you. The trail, the messages, the villages, and the mountains will persist beyond your presence. You have been part of something larger than yourself, a living thread woven into centuries of human effort, endurance, and care. And as you rise to prepare for the night, you feel a gentle sense of completion. Your body, weary yet steady, carries the quiet pride of fulfillment. Your mind, focused yet calm, recognizes the continuity of human endeavor, and your spirit, aligned with the rhythm of mountains, rivers, and stone, feels the enduring pulse of history beneath your feet. The valley grows quieter as evening settles, shadows stretching long across terraces and streams. The air is soft now, warm from the sun, yet cooling as the day wanes. You move slowly, savoring the gentle rhythm of your muscles unwinding, the subtle creak of your joints settling into relaxation. The wind is calm, whispering faintly through the trees and around the stone walls of the tambo. You feel the pulse of the mountains beneath you, steady and enduring, as though the Andes themselves are breathing with you. The sun dips lower, painting the valley in golden hues that fade into soft purples and blues, and you feel a serene gratitude for the journey, the miles covered, the messages carried, the rhythm of footfalls echoing through time. The village around you settles into quiet. Animals rest, fires dim, and voices soften. You lie back for a moment, feeling the grass beneath your hands and the subtle sway of earth beneath your body. Your breath slows, long and steady, in tune with the pulse of the valley. Every stone, stream, and terrace you have passed resonates softly in your memory, carrying the quiet energy of endurance, care, and continuity. The spirits of the mountains, the footprints of runners long past, and the rhythm of life around you meld into a gentle, soothing hum. As night deepens, the stars appear, faint and distant, casting a calm glow over the landscape. The journey is complete for now, the quipu delivered, and the trail behind you a testament to perseverance, observation, and connection. You feel your body relax fully, your mind drifting gently, and your spirit aligned with the steady heartbeat of the Andes. The mountains, the villages, and the terraces rest with you, and you know that this rhythm will continue long after you close your eyes. Let your thoughts float softly, untethered, as the quiet pulse of history, endurance, and human connection carries you into rest. Sleep now, calm and complete, cradled by the valley and mountains you have traveled, trusting the rhythm of your journey to carry you gently into dreams.